Tonight we step beneath the arena sand into the long shadow of Roman entertainment, where applause rises like heat from stone, and the truth feels colder than the marble seats. In the late 20th century, archaeologists studying the Colosseum examined the underground chambers where lifts, cages, ramps, and holding cells once fed living bodies into daylight. Scholars connected with major museums and universities have described the structure not as a simple stadium, but as a vast machine for timing, surprise, fear, and display. That detail matters because it tells you something quiet and unsettling. Roman violence was not chaos. It was organized. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as the night settles around you, right where you're watching from, and your local time, somewhere, another listener may be drifting into the same old Roman darkness. You're standing now in the morning air of the amphitheatre. The stone is still cool under your sandals. Dust gathers at the edges of the stairways, pale and dry, smelling faintly of sun, sweat, damp straw, and animals waiting below. Above you, the sky opens wide, almost innocent in its blue calm. Around you, thousands of people settle into place, speaking softly at first, then louder, until the arena begins to breathe like one enormous creature. It is not yet bloodthirsty, not openly. That is the first uncomfortable truth. The crowd does not arrive screaming like monsters from a fable. They arrive as citizens. They arrive with children, food, jokes, complaints, debts, gossip, and sore feet. They arrive because this is public life, because everyone else is going, because the emperor is paid, because a magistrate wishes to be remembered, because Rome teaches its people where to look. Records confirm that amphitheatres were built across the Roman world, from North Africa to Britain, from Spain to the eastern provinces. The Colosseum itself, begun under Vespasian and opened under Titus, could hold tens of thousands of spectators. Oxford and Yale historians have often emphasised that such buildings were not accidental luxuries. They were public architecture with a political voice. Stone could speak if the empire gave it enough seats. You feel that voice around you. The arena floor lies open and pale, covered with sand to absorb what must not remain visible for long. The Latin word for sand gives the arena its name, yet you do not need the word to understand its purpose. Sand hides footprints. Sand drinks spills. Sand can be raked smooth again, as though nothing happened. There is something almost too neat about that. A trumpet sounds. For a moment, conversation thins. A door opens below the line of sight, and the first figures enter. They may be attendants, handlers, condemned prisoners, or performers warming the day with ceremony. Rome rarely begins with the worst thing. It builds. It prepares the eye. It teaches attention slowly, kindly, almost politely, which is perhaps the most chilling method of all. You notice the seating first. The best places are nearest the action, and the highest seats are far away in sun and wind. Senators, knights, ordinary citizens, women, foreigners, enslaved people, and the poor are not mixed freely like dust in a storm. They are sorted, they are arranged. The spectacle does not only show violence, it shows society looking at violence from assigned positions. That is no small detail. The amphitheatre turns the Roman world into a visible diagram. Power sits close enough to see faces. Poverty watches from above, where bodies become smaller, where pain becomes pattern. The city has found a way to make hierarchy feel natural, because everyone can see it carved in stone beneath the open sky. A mainstream fact stands quietly behind this scene. Roman games were often tied to public generosity, political honour, religious calendars, funerary memory, and imperial celebration. They were not merely entertainment in the modern sense. They belonged to a culture where public display and authority were braided together. Research from institutions such as Stanford and the University of Chicago has often treated spectacle as a language of power, not just a pastime. Still, you wonder why violence held such power over the Roman eye. The answer is not simple, and the best scholars do not pretend it is. Some argue that the arena trained people to accept Roman discipline. Others suggest it expressed deep beliefs about courage, masculinity, punishment, and fate. A few point toward older ritual roots, where death before witnesses carried a sacred or communal meaning. The debate remains open, and that uncertainty gives the sand its darkness, because perhaps the Romans were not watching violence only because they enjoyed it. Perhaps they were watching because Rome had taught them that violence explained the world. You see it in the arrangement of the day. Beasts may appear from provinces most spectators will never visit. Criminals may be punished in forms designed to be remembered. Gladiators may step forward with polished helmets, trained bodies, and names the crowd already knows. The empire brings the edges of the earth to the centre, then asks the public to admire how completely those edges can be controlled. A quirky tidbit survives in the strange details of presentation. Some Roman spectacles used elaborate stage scenery, artificial forests, painted rocks, hidden trap doors, and mechanical devices that could lift animals suddenly into view. Ancient writers describe moments that sound less like sport and more like a dangerous theatre. Imagine a quiet section of sand suddenly opening, and from beneath it rises a bear, confused, furious, blinking into the Roman sun. The crowd gasps, not only from cruelty, perhaps, also from wonder, also from the childlike thrill of impossible things made real. Rome knows this mixture very well. Fear and beauty, punishment and pageantry, discipline and surprise. The empire does not simply show death, it wraps death in craft. That may be why the darkness is difficult to face. If the games were only savage, they would be easier to place at a distance. You could call the Romans brutal and leave them there, sealed behind the centuries. But the arena is more troubling because it is organised, beautiful, expensive, festive, communal, and deeply human. You hear vendors moving along the aisles. You smell bread, olives, cheap wine, animal musk, and the wool of cloaks warmed by morning. Someone laughs behind you. Someone complains about the view. A child asks a question and receives an answer too casual for comfort. Down below, men adjust ropes and gates. The day is being prepared like a meal. There is gentle sarcasm hidden in the stones. If stones can be sarcastic, Rome, that great teacher of roads, law, aqueducts, poetry, and civic order, also mastered the art of making death punctual. The same civilization that measured water through arches could measure suspense through trapdoors. Efficient, yes, very civilized, in the Roman way, and yet, you should not imagine every spectator feeling the same thing. One person may crave excitement, another may seek justice, another may admire courage, another may be bored and waiting for the famous fighter later in the day, another may feel sick, yet remain seated because the city itself is watching, and to leave is also a kind of statement. The arena makes private feeling public. That is part of its force. In a crowd, your own reaction becomes uncertain. You clap because others clap. You flinch because others do not. You laugh at the wrong moment, then hope nobody noticed. You become lighter than yourself, carried by the mood around you. The Romans understood crowds, even without modern language for psychology. They understood that emotion spreads, and that shared emotion can become loyalty. A scholarly debate still circles this point. Were the games mainly a tool of control, a gift to the people, a religious survival, a social habit, or an expression of values that Romans already held? Historians disagree in careful tones, because the evidence gives fragments, not confession. Stones do not tell you whether a man smiled. Inscriptions do not preserve the trembling of a child's hand, so you listen instead. You listen to the low murmur before the spectacle begins. You listen to the hinges. You listen to the animal breathing somewhere beneath the floor. You listen to Rome teaching itself where to place fear. The dark truth is not that Romans were uniquely cruel. That would be too easy, and perhaps too comforting. The darker truth is that violence became popular when it was given meaning, rhythm, architecture, music, status, and a place in the civic day. It became acceptable when it was made orderly. It became memorable when it was made beautiful. And in the pale sand below, the morning waits. The city around you wakes before the sun has fully cleared the rooftops, and Rome begins its restless daily argument with itself. You move through narrow streets where dawn arrives in fragments. Light slips between upper balconies. Smoke curls from cooking fires. Donkeys stamp their hooves near shop fronts, while bakers drag warm loaves from ovens darkened by years of ash. The air smells of flour, fish sauce, lamp oil, damp stone, and the sharp human closeness of a city too large for silence. Rome is never truly quiet. Even in the early hours, sandals scrape across paving stones. Water sellers call out. A cartwheel catches in a rut and makes a sound like a complaint from the earth. Somewhere, a door bangs open. Somewhere else, an argument begins with impressive confidence and no evidence, which feels comfortingly familiar across 2,000 years. You pass walls covered with painted notices. Some advertise shows, names, contests, promises, and sponsors. Others praise a candidate or insult one, because Rome has never been shy about public opinion. A citizen might learn the mood of a neighbourhood by reading its walls, if he can read at all. If not, the images still speak. Swords, animals, crowns, palm branches, bold names, and large claims. The city is already preparing its own appetite. A mainstream fact helps steady this wandering scene. Archaeological remains at Pompeii preserve painted advertisements for gladiatorial games, including names of sponsors and promises of shade or comforts for spectators. Researchers from major American and European universities have studied these notices as evidence that spectacle was woven into ordinary urban life, not hidden at the edge of society. Entertainment lived on the walls. You feel how important that is. Violence does not begin at the arena gate. It begins in the streets, in rumour, expectation, painted words, and the slow warming of desire. People discuss fighters as people now discuss actors, athletes, scandals, and public disasters they pretend not to enjoy. They ask who will appear. They argue who has better skill. They repeat stories heard from a cousin, a servant, a drunk neighbour, or some very reliable man who knows absolutely nothing. A barber pauses with his razor and gives an opinion. A customer nods gravely, half-shaved and entirely vulnerable. A group of boys imitate sword strokes with sticks near a doorway. Their movements are clumsy, but their seriousness is magnificent. Childhood is always practicing the adult world. Even when the adult world should be embarrassed, your mind drifts into the daily pressure of Roman life. This is a city of hunger and ambition, law and rumour, grandeur and rot. Temples rise above crowded lanes. Marble shines near sewage channels. Elite houses hide gardens behind blank outer walls, while poorer families sleep in cramped upper rooms where fire is a constant fear. Rome glitters, certainly. Rome also sweats. For many people, life is uncertain. Grain prices matter. Patronage matters. Public favour matters. A magistrate's generosity may mean a day of food, entertainment, and relief from the grinding anxiety of survival. A free show is not just leisure. It is a gift, a signal, a bargain, and sometimes a distraction wearing a festive cloak. A council decree from several Roman towns proves that seating, public order, and honours at spectacles could be regulated carefully. These events required organisation, funding, rank, and civic control. Scholars at Oxford have often emphasised that Roman public life was built around visibility Who sat where, who paid, who entered first, and who was named aloud all mattered deeply. The city teaches you to watch rank. You notice the patrons moving with attendants. Their robes are brighter, cleaner, easier to see. They do not simply attend public events. They are seen attending. They give, and the crowd receives. The bargain is old and delicate. The people gain spectacle. The powerful gain gratitude, memory, and the sweet fragrance of public approval. Of course, approval smells better when someone else pays for it. A quirky tidbit appears in the surviving enthusiasm for famous performers. Graffiti from Roman towns sometimes praises gladiators in language that sounds almost romantic. Some fighters were described with admiration, even desire, despite their low legal status. One name scratched on a wall could carry a little fever of fandom. The arena produced celebrities from men who remained socially stained. There is the contradiction again. Rome despises certain bodies, and then worships them for an afternoon. It marks men as low, then cheers when those men embody courage in its most visible form. It condemns violence outside approved spaces, then praises controlled violence under official eyes. The city is not confused. It is disciplined in its contradictions. That is more troubling. As the day brightens, people pour from alleys into wider roads. Some carry cushions. Some bring food wrapped in cloth. Some wear garlands if the day is festive. Others arrive because absence may be noticed, and public life has a long memory. The city becomes a current, pulling bodies toward a shared destination. You are carried with them. The crowd includes shopkeepers, sailors, clerks, soldiers, labourers, freedmen, enslaved attendants, wealthy women in shaded litters, and children who must hurry to keep pace. Not everyone has the same reason for going. Some crave excitement, some crave company, some crave proof that Rome is still powerful, some crave the simple blessing of not working for a few hours. This matters, because popularity rarely grows from one feeling alone. Roman violence becomes popular because it touches many needs at once. It gives the poor spectacle without payment. It gives elites prestige. It gives rulers a visible bond with the people. It gives the crowd stories to carry home. It gives the city a shared pulse, even when that pulse is morally uneasy. An open debate remains among historians of Roman social life. Some view the games as calculated political management. Others caution that the audience was not merely passive, because crowds could cheer, complain, demand mercy, mock officials, and shape reputations. A growing body of scholarship treats spectators as active participants in public culture, though the exact balance of control and choice remains contested. You feel that tension in the street. No soldier needs to drag the people there. No priest whispers them into obedience. No emperor personally commands every laugh. The city has learned a habit, and habit is often stronger than command. Once violence becomes part of festival, memory, status, and conversation, it no longer needs to explain itself each morning. It simply appears on the schedule. You pass a shrine near a corner, darkened by smoke from countless offerings. Someone touches the stone briefly, then keeps walking. Nearby, a vendor arranges figs and cheap cups. Sacred gesture and market noise share the same breath. That is Rome. Nothing stays separate for long. Law, hunger, ritual, ambition, and entertainment brush against one another in the street. For a moment, the city feels like a living throat. It swallows rumour, fear, hope, and boredom, then sends them all toward the arena. The violence waiting there will not feel like an intrusion. It will feel like the next note in a song already being sung by walls, advertisements, patrons, vendors, and restless feet. You understand now that the arena is not apart from Rome. It is Rome concentrated. The stone seats merely gather what the city has already taught its people to desire: fear, admire, and accept. The street prepares the eye before the first weapon flashes. The painted notice prepares the imagination before the first gate opens. The crowd prepares itself through jokes, hunger, argument, and the ordinary comfort of moving together. And somewhere in that movement, violence becomes less strange. Not harmless, never harmless. Only familiar enough to be popular. Long before the amphitheatre becomes a monument of empire, violence stands beside the Roman dead with a colder and more intimate face. You're no longer pressed among the crowds of the imperial capital. Your mind enters an older Italy, where the air smells of damp soil, pine smoke, and oil poured over stone. The city is smaller now, its power is still growing, still uncertain, still learning how to speak in public gestures. In this older world, honour does not always rest quietly in tombs. Sometimes it asks for witnesses. A funeral procession moves through the streets. The dead man has belonged to an important family. His relatives walk with solemn control, wearing darkened expressions that are half grief and half performance. Musicians sound their instruments. Mourners follow. Wax masks of ancestors may be carried or worn by actors, so the family line appears to return from the shadows. The living are not alone. They walk with the faces of the dead. There is a strange tenderness in it. There is also ambition. Roman aristocratic funerals are not private moments in the modern sense. They are public declarations of ancestry, duty, reputation, and rank. A noble family uses grief to remind the city of its service. The dead man becomes a story carried through the streets, and the story says, "Remember us, honour us, owe us." Ancient historians record that some early gladiatorial contests were staged in connection with elite funerals. Modern scholars at institutions such as Cambridge and Princeton have treated these early games as part of a wider Mediterranean world where blood, honour, and commemoration could overlap. The mainstream fact is simple, but heavy. Gladiatorial combat did not begin as casual sport. It grew from rituals of memory, status, and death. You stand near the place where the funeral display will end. The sun lowers slowly, pressing gold against the walls. People gather, but their mood is different from the great festival crowds of later centuries. This audience is not yet trained by grand architecture and imperial schedule. It is watching a family's sorrow become a public test. Two men step forward. Their weapons are real. Their bodies are living. Their danger is not symbolic, although symbols cling to them like smoke. They may be enslaved men, prisoners, or professional fighters in some early form. They do not merely entertain. They stand at the border between the dead and the living, where Roman imagination has placed courage, offering, and remembrance. The crowd leans inward. You can feel the tension in the skin. The first clash of metal sounds smaller than you expect, almost private, like a tool striking stone. Then another sound follows, sharper and closer. The men circle. Dust lifts around their feet. Somewhere, a woman murmurs a prayer. Somewhere, a boy stops breathing for a moment and does not know why. This is not yet the arena machine. This is a seed. A quirky or fringe tidbit survives around the possible origins of gladiatorial combat. Some ancient writers believe the Romans borrowed the practice from earlier peoples in Italy, particularly the Etruscans or Campanians. Later, imagination wrapped these origins in a mist of foreign rites and funeral blood. Scholars remain cautious, because ancient explanations often mix memory with myth. Still, the idea lingers, like a half-seen figure near a tomb road. Perhaps Rome inherited more than it invented. Perhaps it refined what others had already feared. In this older setting, violence carries a different weight. It is not yet mass entertainment advertised in paint. It is a gesture for the dead, a public offering of courage and life force, though the exact meaning remains debated. Some historians describe it as a substitute for human sacrifice, softened into combat. Others argue that this explanation may be too neat, too eager to find a single dark origin. The debate remains open among specialists, and the evidence refuses to kneel politely. That refusal matters. Human beings like beginnings to be clean. We enjoy pointing to one moment and saying, "There, that is where the darkness started." But Roman entertainment does not offer such comfort. It grows through layers. Funeral honour becomes noble display. Noble display becomes public spectacle. Public spectacle becomes political language. Political language becomes habit. Habit becomes appetite. The path is slow. That is why it is frightening. The fighting men move again. One shield catches the fading light. One blade strikes and slips away. The audience does not yet roar with the practiced thunder of later centuries. The silence between sounds is deep. You hear birds beyond the walls. You hear sandals shifting on packed earth. You hear grief watching violence and trying to call it meaning. The family of the dead stands close enough to be seen. Their dignity depends on control. They must not appear careless, and they must not appear weak. They have arranged a display that says their household can command men, money, courage, and blood. The dead man's honour is not merely remembered, it is enacted. Rome trusts enactment. A thing becomes real when it's made visible. Virtue must be shown, rank must be shown, punishment must be shown, grief must be shown. Even memory steps into the street and wears a mask. This public hunger for visible proof helps explain why violent entertainment could flourish. It gave moral ideas a body, and then placed that body where everyone could look. You begin to see a hidden pattern forming. The Romans often treated the body as a surface on which power could write. A soldier's scars proved service. A slave's marks proved ownership. A criminal's execution proved law. A gladiator's endurance proved courage under domination. In each case, the watching public learned to read pain as information. That's a hard thought to hold gently, and yet the narration must hold it gently, because the past is made of human beings, not monsters arranged for our convenience. The mourners are not simply cruel, they are grieving within a culture that gives grief a blade. The crowd is not simply savage. It is watching a performance that claims to honour the dead. The fighters are not only victims or heroes, they are trapped inside meanings other people need. The combat ends. Perhaps one man falls. Perhaps the fight stops before death. The details shift from case to case, and later Roman memory reshapes the earliest customs into sharper legends. What remains is the association, blood and remembrance, courage and status, death answered by danger. A family using controlled violence to speak with the dead and impress the living. In time, this association will loosen from the funeral and travel elsewhere. The spectacle will become broader, louder, more elaborate, and more available to political ambition. Yet here, in the older dusk, you can feel why it had power. Violence made emotion visible. It gave grief a public form. It transformed private loss into a scene that others could witness, discuss, and remember. The dead man receives more than mourning. He receives a performance of strength. You may find it strange, but Rome would not. To the Roman mind, memory required labour. Names had to be recited. Ancestors had to be honoured. Public rank had to be renewed. A noble house did not survive through quiet feeling alone. It survived through display, through repetition, through the hard theatre of civic life. So violence enters Roman entertainment through a doorway marked memory. Not amusement at first, not simply cruelty, not the idle hunger of a bored city. It enters as ritualized honour, as family pride, as a dangerous offering at the edge of the grave. That origin does not excuse what follows. It only makes the darkness older, more layered, and more human. The evening settles. Smoke thins above the funeral place. The crowd disperses into streets where lamps begin to glow. The dead remain behind in stone, ash, name, and story. Yet something living has also been planted, something that will grow larger than the families who first used it. Rome has discovered that blood before witnesses can hold attention like a sacred flame, and once attention gathers, power is never far away. The amphitheatre rises as if Rome has taught stone to form a circle around fear. You stand before its outer wall while morning light slides across arches stacked upon arches, each opening dark within its pale frame. The building feels less like a place and more like an answer to crowding, ambition, punishment, ceremony, and appetite. Rome has taken older violence and given it architecture, schedules, tickets, entrances, ranks, and a beautiful public face. The first impression is order. That is what unsettles you most. Nothing about this vast structure feels improvised. The stairways control movement, the corridors divide bodies, the entrances pull thousands inward, yet prevent them from becoming one dangerous flood. The seats curve with mathematical patience. From above, the arena floor waits at the centre like an eye that never closes. Roman engineers understood crowds with almost chilling practicality. Modern studies by architectural historians at American and British universities have shown how amphitheatres used tiered seating, repeated entrances, and circulation routes to manage immense audiences. The Colosseum could empty with remarkable speed for such an ancient building. That is a mainstream fact, but it carries a deeper whisper. Rome did not merely invite the crowd. Rome processed it. You pass beneath an arch. The temperature changes. Outside, the city is bright and loud. Inside, the passage is cooler, shaded, and filled with footsteps. Voices echo against stone and return as a softened murmur, as though the building itself is rehearsing the sound of many throats. You smell dust, wool, leather, and a faint bitterness of oil lamps lingering in the darker spaces. A hand brushes the wall beside you. The stone is rough, but worn smoother where countless people have touched it. You follow the current upward and inward, through controlled darkness toward light. The journey itself prepares the mind. The building narrows your world, then opens it suddenly. Rome is good at entrances. Rome is excellent at making you feel that revelation has been planned for your benefit. Then the arena appears. The sand below glows pale beneath the sun. Across from you, the opposite tiers climb in a human pattern of faces, garments, shadows, and gestures. High above, awnings may soften the glare if the day is generous. Attendants move like small marks on a tablet. Gates wait at intervals around the arena wall, closed for now, each one holding a possibility. This is not a field. This is a machine. Every part has a purpose. The wall prevents escape. The seats arrange judgment. The gates control timing. The underground spaces hide preparation. The sand conceals traces. The imperial box displays power. Even the distance between spectator and victim has meaning. Close enough to see fear, far enough to feel safe. A quirky tidbit lies beneath the floor, where the hidden chambers once formed a shadow city of ropes, cages, ramps, and platforms. Later reconstructions of the Colosseum's underground working suggest that animals and scenery could be raised into view through trap doors. It must have felt like the earth itself was obeying Rome. A forest could appear, a beast could rise, a condemned man could find the world changing under his feet. Very efficient nightmare management. You imagine workers below, unseen by the crowd, pulling ropes with blistered hands. They hear the roar above only as thunder through beams and stone. They do not see the full illusion they help create. They know the smell of animals before the spectators do. They know which gate sticks, which cage rattles, which man has gone quiet from fear. The spectacle above depends on hidden labour below. That detail widens the darkness. Roman entertainment is not only the dramatic moment on the sand, it is the system that makes the moment possible. The carpenters, animal keepers, cleaners, trainers, announcers, guards, water carriers, musicians, and officials all belong to the machine. Violence becomes popular when many hands learn to prepare it as ordinary work. The audience may see destiny. The workers see logistics. An open scholarly debate surrounds how much the average spectator understood about the machinery behind the spectacle. Some historians argue that the visible wonder mattered more than the hidden mechanism. Others suggest Roman audiences enjoyed technical marvels and may have appreciated the craft behind the surprise. University researchers studying spectacle culture often point out that Roman viewers were not naive. They knew performance, but they still wanted to be amazed. That is familiar, is it not? People can know something is arranged and still surrender to it. A stage does not need to be believed completely. It only needs to be believed for a moment. The amphitheatre makes that moment repeatable. It turns surprise into a civic product. It gives fear a timetable. The crowd settles by rank, and rank becomes part of the show. The elite appear near the front, their clothing and attendance visible to those behind them. Ordinary citizens fill the wider tiers. Women and the poorer spectators often sit farther away, where the sun is harsher and the details blur. The building does not merely contain society. It performs society with stone precision. You notice how the line of sight works. Everyone faces the same centre. The city's divisions remain, but attention unites them. This is one of Rome's cleverest arrangements. People are separated in status, yet joined in looking. They experience hierarchy and unity at the same time. The arena says you have your place, and yet you belong to this larger body. That message is powerful. A senator may watch from cushioned dignity. A baker may watch with crumbs in his beard. A child may watch between shoulders. An enslaved attendant may watch because his master watches. Different lives, different freedoms, different fears, and one shared centre of attention. For a few hours, Rome becomes a single eye. The machine works because the crowd helps turn it. A gladiator steps into view, and the building changes without moving. The architecture seems to lean toward him. Thousands of gazes press upon one body. His helmet flashes. His shield catches light. He is trained, costumed, framed, and exposed. He is both person and symbol, both worker and offering, both despised man and temporary star. That contradiction is the engine. The arena turns weakness into display, danger into discipline, suffering into story, and story into public memory. It teaches the crowd how to read what they see. A brave stance means virtue. A clumsy retreat means shame. A wound means proof. A raised hand may mean appeal. The spectators do not merely consume violence. They interpret it. Rome loves interpretation when Rome controls the scene. This is why the amphitheatre matters so deeply. Violence in an alley is disorder. Violence on a battlefield is necessity, or at least Rome tells itself so. Violence in the amphitheatre is arranged, framed, paid for, and supervised. The same act that might disturb public peace elsewhere becomes, within these walls, a lesson in courage, punishment, and power. The boundary creates permission. You feel the seduction of that boundary. The curved wall says nothing here belongs to ordinary life, even though ordinary citizens fill every seat. The sand says traces will vanish. The music says emotion may rise. The official presence says this has approval. The crowd says you're not alone in watching, and so the impossible becomes permitted. There is a quiet terror in that. Not terror made of screams, but terror made of systems. 1,000 small arrangements gently remove hesitation. A ticket, a seat, a sponsor's name, a trumpet, a gate, a rule, a cheer. Each piece is reasonable on its own. Together, they form something vast enough to make cruelty feel ceremonial. The sun climbs higher, heat gathers in the stone, the first shadows shorten, and the arena brightens until every gesture below becomes visible. Somewhere beneath the floor, men wait beside ropes, somewhere behind a gate. An animal shifts its weight. Somewhere in the crowd, a spectator decides he is ready. The machine has awakened. The gladiator enters the public imagination as a man standing between disgrace and glory, and Rome cannot look away. You see him first not in battle, but in training. The yard is enclosed, dusty, and watched by men who measure bodies the way merchants measure grain. Wooden posts stand scarred by repeated blows. Practice weapons thud against shields. Sand clings to sweat. The air smells of leather, iron, old straw, and the sour patience of discipline. A trainer calls a command. The fighters move again. Some are enslaved. Some are prisoners. Some have sold themselves by contract, choosing danger over poverty, debt, or invisibility. That choice does not make the world kind. It only makes the cage more complicated. Rome has many ways of turning desperation into opportunity, then congratulating itself on the opportunity. A mainstream fact gives the scene its firm outline. Gladiators were often trained in specialized schools, where their diet, exercise, weapons, and fighting styles were controlled by professional instructors. Archaeological and skeletal research, including studies discussed by major universities and scientific journals, suggests that some fighters received medical care and structured nutrition because they were expensive investments. A dead gladiator could thrill a crowd once. A trained survivor could earn money again. That is the practical Roman heart beating beneath the romance. A fighter is property, performer, athlete, risk, and story. He is a human being. But the system sees layers of value wrapped around his body. His shoulders are profit. His scars are advertising. His courage is marketable. His survival is good business, unless his death is even better theatre. You watch him practice with a wooden sword against a post. Strike, recover, guard, turn, breathe. The rhythm becomes almost soothing, until you remember what it rehearses. His instructor corrects the angle of his shield. A physician examines another man's bruised arm. A cook stirs a thick meal of barley and beans, the plain fuel of bodies expected to endure. Ancient sources sometimes called gladiators by terms linked to barley eating. Modern analysis of bones from a gladiator cemetery near Ephesus has supported the idea of a carbohydrate-heavy diet, with mineral supplements possibly used for recovery. Researchers have treated this not as a charming detail, but as evidence of organized care inside a brutal profession. Rome feeds what Rome intends to use. You notice their differences. One man carries a larger shield, another practices with a net, another holds a curved blade, another moves under the weight of a helmet that narrows his sight but magnifies his presence. Gladiatorial combat is not random brawling. It is staged contrast. Body against body, weapon against weapon, style against style. The crowd loves pattern. A heavily armed fighter appears more dangerous when placed against a lighter opponent. A net and trident create suspense because they promise distance, entanglement, and sudden reversal. A sword and shield promise pressure. A helmet hides expression, making the man both person and image. The audience learns these types and waits for their familiar tensions. A quirky tidbit clings to the names of famous gladiators. Some became objects of intense admiration, with graffiti praising their charm, strength, and appeal. One fighter might be mocked by respectable society, yet desired by admirers who scratched his name onto walls. The contradiction is almost comic. Rome says a gladiator is socially low, then sighs dramatically over his muscles like everyone suddenly forgot the rules. Very dignified, naturally. This fame does not free him. It may even bind him more tightly. A celebrated fighter carries expectation like armour. The crowd wants him to win beautifully, suffer visibly, and remain available for future stories. His name becomes public property. His courage belongs to those who paid to see it. His fear must stay hidden, because fear is allowed only when it serves the drama. You stand near the barracks as evening approaches. The training yard quiets. A man sits alone, wrapping his fingers with slow care. Another touches a small charm. Another jokes too loudly. Someone coughs. Someone hums under his breath. These are not marble heroes. They are tired bodies preparing for appointed danger. The open debate among scholars grows delicate here. Were gladiators mostly victims of coercion, or could some experience real pride, identity, and agency within the profession? Historians disagree over emphasis, because the evidence shows exploitation and admiration together. Researchers at institutions such as Harvard and Oxford have often warned against making the arena too simple. A trapped man can still master a craft. A famous man can still be owned. That is the strange cruelty of it. Rome does not need to deny a gladiator's courage. It can admire that courage while continuing to consume him. The system is flexible enough to praise the man and degrade him at the same time. He may be honoured with palm branches, poems, painted images, and crowd affection. He may still remain marked by infamy and law and social memory. You watch a novice learn how to fall. This is important. He is not only learning how to strike, but how to survive the audience. A clumsy fall can invite contempt. A controlled retreat may preserve dignity. A raised finger may ask for mercy. But even that gesture must be timed. The body becomes language. The fighter must speak clearly with shield, step, wound, and silence. The trainer sees everything. He knows that spectacle depends on legibility. The crowd must understand who is pressing, who is weakening, who deserves admiration, who disappoints expectation. A fight that ends too quickly may anger those who came for tension. A fight that drags without grace may bore them. The gladiator must risk death while also respecting pacing. That is a nasty little job description. Truly, there is another hidden truth here. Gladiators made violence emotionally safer for spectators because they transformed it into skill. The audience could focus on technique, bravery, reversal, endurance, and style. They were not merely watching injury. They were watching trained performance under fatal pressure. Skill gave cruelty a graceful surface. A sword flashes in the late light. A fighter's face remains calm, or almost calm. Perhaps he has learned calm. Perhaps his body remembers panic but refuses to display it. The crowd will later call this courage, and perhaps it is. Yet courage inside coercion has a different taste. It is bitter, metallic, and difficult to swallow. Some gladiators could win freedom after repeated success. Wooden swords were sometimes awarded as symbols of release from the arena. This fact has tempted many imaginations, because it offers a doorway in the darkness. Yet freedom was not guaranteed, and survival required a long friendship with luck. For every man remembered with a proud inscription, many others disappeared into sand, ash, and bookkeeping. Still, the dream mattered. A fighter could imagine release. A spectator could imagine justice and victory. A sponsor could claim generosity. The system fed on hope as well as fear. That may be why the gladiator became such a powerful figure in Roman culture. He was the condemned man who could become celebrated, the dishonoured body that could display perfect discipline, the expendable person who briefly commanded every eye. The barracks grow dim, lamps appear, the scent of oil mixes with sweat and cooked grain. Outside, Rome continues its evening noise, unaware or uninterested in each private silence behind the walls. Tomorrow, or another day soon, these men will step into brightness while thousands decide what their courage means. You understand why the gladiator haunted Rome. He carried the empire's favourite contradictions in one breathing body: freedom and slavery, fame and shame, training and terror, beauty and harm. He allowed Rome to admire courage without questioning the conditions that made such courage necessary. And that is a darker popularity than simple bloodlust. The animals arrive from distances most Romans will never cross, carrying the smell of empire in their fur, scales or feathers, and fear. You begin at the edge of a port, where morning fog hangs low over masts and ropes. Ships creak against the harbour stones. Sailors shout across the water, their voices roughened by salt and sleeplessness. Somewhere below deck, something heavy shifts in a cage and answers the world with a deep, unhappy sound. The crowd on the quay falls quiet. Not completely, of course. Rome is not gifted at complete silence. Men still bargain over cargo. Officials still argue about paperwork. Because even a lion apparently cannot enter civilization without some bored clerk becoming involved. Yet a different attention gathers around the covered cages. Everyone knows something rare has come ashore. The Empire has sent its wildness to the capital. A mainstream fact steadies this scene. Roman spectacles displayed animals captured across vast territories, including lions, leopards, bears, bulls, crocodiles, elephants, ostriches, and other creatures from North Africa, the Near East, Europe, and beyond. Scholars at major universities have linked these displays to imperial power, because exotic animals showed the crowd that Rome could reach distant landscapes and drag their living symbols into public view. That is the hidden meaning beneath the entertainment. A beast does not enter the arena alone. It carries a province with it. It carries forests, deserts, rivers, and mountains transformed into spectacle. It tells the spectator that the world is large, but Rome is larger. It whispers that even nature has been arrested, transported, and scheduled. You follow the animals inland through a route of dust and heat. The cages move slowly, hauled by teams, guarded by men with poles and weapons. Children run behind until someone shouts them away. Dogs bark from doorways. Women lean from upper windows, curious and wary. The beasts smell the city before they see it, and the city smells them back. The scent is intense. Dung, hay, blood, stale water, damp hide, panic, and sea rot blend beneath the sun. A leopard paces inside a wooden cage, its shoulder muscles shifting like liquid under spotted skin. An ostrich lifts its head with offended elegance. A bear claws at the bars and leaves pale scratches in the wood. Each creature is alive with a private terror that nobody has paid to understand. The Romans paid for the opposite. They paid to convert animal terror into human wonder. In the arena, the appearance of a rare beast could provoke awe before violence began. The spectacle told viewers that the empire did not merely conquer cities, it conquered the imagination. It could summon animals from landscapes known only through merchants, soldiers, maps, and rumours. A quirky tidbit survives in accounts of elaborate animal hunts where artificial scenery recreated forests, rocky places, or foreign landscapes inside the arena. Some events presented the floor as a temporary wilderness, built by carpenters and painters with impressive confidence. Rome created nature indoors, then destroyed it for applause. Subtle, really. Nothing says harmony with the world like importing a rhinoceros and giving it a deadline. You stand within the holding area beneath the spectacle, where light enters in slants from above. The animals are closer now. The deep sounds echo differently underground. A cage rattles, a chain scrapes, a handler curses softly. Dust drifts through the air and settles on hair, skin, and timber. The world here is not heroic. It is cramped, hot, dangerous, and full of waiting. The handlers know fear in a practical way. They do not speak of symbols while securing a gate. They know which animal lunges. They know which beast refuses food. They know where claws can reach through gaps. Their work is skilled and perilous, but almost invisible to the crowd. Once again, wonder above depends on anxious labour below. Open scholarly debate surrounds the scale and ecological impact of these animal spectacles. Ancient writers sometimes report astonishing numbers, but historians disagree over how literally such figures should be taken. Researchers from universities including Oxford and Chicago have treated the numbers cautiously, comparing texts with logistics, archaeology, and environmental history. What remains clear is that the trade in spectacle animals was substantial enough to leave a moral and ecological shadow. That shadow stretches across the map. You imagine hunters moving through tall grass at the edge of a North African morning. Nets are stretched, pits are covered. Men wait with ropes and spears. The animal they capture has no idea it is becoming a message. It knows only sudden pain, confinement, hunger, and motion. The Empire turns that suffering into proof of reach. In the arena, the crowd see something different. They see strangeness made visible. They see a creature that belongs to stories and military reports. They see danger without having to cross deserts. They see the world delivered to their seats. For many spectators, this may be the closest they ever come to the far edge of Empire. A lion emerges. The sun touches its mane. The crowd responds with a sound that is not yet approval or pity, but astonishment. The animal pauses, confused by the enclosing wall, the smell of people, the open light, the impossible noise. Its body carries the memory of open space, but stone answers every direction. Then the hunt begins. Men trained for this performance move across the sand with spears, nets, shields, or bows. They may be admired for agility and nerve. The audience watches the contest as a display of human mastery over wild strength. The animal is dangerous, so killing it can be framed as courage. The beast is magnificent, so destroying it becomes more dramatic. Rome has found another contradiction and seated thousands around it. Sometimes animals fought other animals. Sometimes they attacked condemned prisoners. Sometimes trained hunters displayed skill against them. The variation kept the spectacle from becoming predictable. Each pairing carried a different lesson. Man over beast, beast over criminal, empire over nature, order over chaos. The crowd did not need these messages explained. The staging taught them quietly. A crocodile might appear in a flooded arena scene, its armoured body sliding through water that should never have been there. Elephants could astonish spectators with size and intelligence. Bears brought a northern heaviness. Leopards a flash of patterned speed. Bulls a familiar but dangerous force. The world became a bestiary under Roman management. For a moment, perhaps, pity enters you. It may have entered some Romans too. Ancient writers occasionally notice animal suffering, especially when a creature behaved nobly or unexpectedly. An elephant said to plead, a beast refusing to fight, an animal showing loyalty or confusion. These stories troubled the clean line between entertainment and sympathy. Even in a culture trained to watch, emotion could wander off script. That is important. The popularity of violent animal spectacle did not require everyone to feel nothing. It only required the structure to continue despite feeling. A spectator could admire the lion and still cheer its killing. A child could be frightened and still remember the day with wonder. A ruler could spend enormous sums to show generosity while turning distant life into expendable ornament. The animals made empire sensuous. They gave conquest a smell, a roar, a skin, a scale, a trembling cage. They transformed geography into experience. Without leaving Rome, the people could feel that the world was being brought inward, subdued, and displayed beneath their collective gaze. You hear the crowd swell as another gate opens. This time the animal hesitates in shadow before stepping out. Its eyes adjust. Its paws touch the sand. Above it, thousands lean forward, searching not only for death, but for wonder. They want the thrill of the distant made near. They want to believe Rome can gather every horizon into one circle of stone. And for a few terrible moments, it can. The condemned are led out when the day has grown brighter, and the crowd has already learned how to look. You're seated among heat, stone, and restless bodies as the mood shifts with a strange smoothness. The spectacle no longer presents rare animals or trained fighters. Now the arena receives those whom Rome has marked as broken, guilty, useless, dangerous, or politically convenient. The sand waits beneath them with a silence too public to be merciful. They enter under guard. Some walk upright. Some stumble. Some appear numb, as if the mind has wisely stepped away from the body. Others look around with quick, desperate eyes, trying to understand whether any face in the thousands might still belong to the human world. The answer is uncertain. The crowd is many things at once, and mercy can drown easily in noise. A mainstream fact stands behind this darker practice. Public execution was a recognized part of Roman punishment, and certain condemned criminals could be exposed to beasts, burned, crucified, or killed in staged scenes. Legal historians at universities such as Yale and Columbia have studied how Roman law used public penalties not merely to remove offenders, but to display authority. Punishment was meant to be seen. That visibility is the key. Rome punishes in public because punishment is a message. The condemned body becomes a warning written large enough for thousands to read. It says that law has teeth. It says that the state can reach you. It says that shame may continue even when life is ending. It says, very calmly, that Rome owns the final scene. You feel the cruelty deepen because this is not contest in the same sense. A gladiator may fight, however trapped his life may be. A hunter may display skill. A condemned prisoner often receives no meaningful chance, only a role in a lesson already written by power. The crowd knows this, yet the event continues. The spectacle teaches distance. From your seat, the condemned are smaller than they would be in a room. Their voices cannot reach you clearly. Their terror becomes shape, movement, costume, and timing. The arena edits human suffering by making it visible from far away. It turns the face into a figure. It turns pleading into gesture. It turns a death into a public sentence with scenery. That transformation is dangerous. A quirky tidbit survives in ancient descriptions of execution staged as mythological scenes. Condemned people could be dressed as characters from famous stories and made to suffer in ways that echoed the tales. The audience recognized the reference, because culture made the cruelty clever. Rome did not simply kill. Sometimes Rome added literary decoration, as if a person facing death really needed a theme. There is the gentle sarcasm again, tired and unavoidable. Imagine a society so proud of its education that even execution can become a dramatic adaptation. The crowd sees punishment and myth at once. A story they already know is suddenly given a body that can bleed, struggle, or burn. Learned amusement and state violence meet in the same bright sand. This is one of the darkest turns in Roman entertainment. The audience is not merely asked to approve justice, it is invited to enjoy the staging of justice. Law becomes theatre becomes warning becomes entertainment. The moral categories soften at the edges until people can clap at punishment because it has been arranged beautifully enough. A debate among scholars remains active and uneasy. Some historians argue that Roman executions were primarily instruments of terror, intended to uphold social order through fear. Others emphasize the ritual and symbolic dimensions, suggesting that public punishment restored a violated hierarchy in front of the community. Researchers at Cambridge and Harvard have explored both views, and the surviving evidence supports more than one answer. Rome could terrify and reassure at the same time. That is what makes the system effective. The condemned person is not treated as an individual story. He or she becomes a type: rebel, thief, murderer, deserter, arsonist, enemy, slave who resisted, foreigner who defied, Christian in certain periods and places, though the scale and frequency of such executions are debated carefully by historians. The label matters because labels make empathy harder. A labelled person is easier to watch. You notice how the announcer, guards, or staging may frame the scene before it occurs. The crowd is told what kind of person stands below. The explanation prepares judgment. A criminal is not simply dying. A criminal is receiving what the law declares deserved. Once the public accepts that frame, pity must climb uphill through the noise. Still, pity may appear. A person cries out to a parent, a spouse, a child, or a god. A body shakes, a blindfold slips. A prisoner refuses to kneel. Another collapses before anything begins. These moments can disturb even trained spectators, because humanity has a stubborn way of returning through tiny gestures. The machine can sort bodies, but it cannot always prevent recognition. Yet recognition is brief. The crowd moves as crowds do. One section shouts. Another laughs nervously. Some look away and then look back. Because looking away is not as simple as people like to pretend. Curiosity has teeth. Fear has gravity. Public emotion pulls at the private will until even disgust becomes part of attention. The sun presses down. You smell hot stone, sweat, and dust disturbed by movement below. Somewhere a vendor calls out with astonishing confidence, as though thirst remains the real emergency. Perhaps it is. Human beings are strange enough to buy a drink beside a death scene and complain if it is warm. The condemned wait. For Rome, waiting is useful. Suspense increases attention. Delay gives authority time to settle over the arena. The crowd studies the powerless person below, and the lesson becomes physical. This is what happens to those placed outside protection. This is what law can do. This is what citizenship may spare you from, if you remain obedient, fortunate, and properly born. Social status shaped punishment profoundly. Roman citizens possessed certain legal protections, especially in comparison with enslaved people, non-citizens, and the most marginalized. Historians of Roman law often emphasize that penalties revealed hierarchy. The same crime did not always lead to the same death. Justice wore different faces depending on rank. That fact chills the air. The arena does not only ask who is guilty, it asks who matters. A senator is not displayed like an enslaved runaway. A citizen may be shielded from punishments inflicted on others. The punishment of low-status bodies teaches the high-status spectator what he is not, and teaches the vulnerable spectator what he could become. This is entertainment as social instruction. The crowd learns safety by watching exposure. It learns belonging by watching exclusion. It learns power by watching helplessness. That does not mean every spectator thinks these thoughts clearly. Most people do not attend a public event to produce a theory. They absorb the lesson through the skin. A gate opens, the staging begins, perhaps beasts are released, or soldiers advance, or a constructed scene starts to unfold. The details vary, but the meaning remains steady. The condemned body is made useful to Rome at the final moment, useful as warning, useful as spectacle. Useful as proof that law is not only written on tablets, but enacted in flesh before witnesses. There is no need to describe every injury. The deeper horror is not in the detail. It is in the calm arrangement surrounding it. Officials have scheduled this. Workers have prepared it. Spectators have come early enough not to miss it. The city has made space for it between other entertainments. That ordinariness is heavier than any shout. You sit with the knowledge that popularity does not always mean delight. Sometimes popularity means familiarity. Sometimes it means public duty, morbid curiosity, civic habit, fear of missing the great event, or the dark relief of seeing someone else placed below the line. Violence thrives when it can borrow many motives at once. Roman punishment knew how to borrow them all. The crowd grows louder, then slowly settles again. The sand will be cleared. The signs of the lesson will be managed. The day will continue, because continuation is part of the lesson too. Rome does not pause for one condemned person. The machine moves forward, and the audience moves with it. In that movement, law becomes memory, and memory becomes another reason to return. The gift of spectacle arrives with soft hands, but it carries the weight of command. You find yourself in the public spaces where Roman power learns to smile. The air is warm with bodies, incense, dust, and bread still wrapped in cloth. Citizens gather beneath statues and porticos, waiting for announcements, favours, grain, contests, payments, or promises. Rome understands that hunger has a voice. It also understands that a fed crowd listens differently from an angry one. A magistrate appears. He does not look like a tyrant in this moment. He looks generous, polished, ceremonious, almost fatherly if one squints hard enough and ignores the entire machinery behind him. His attendants move around him with practiced discipline. Names are called. Honours are displayed. A public notice reminds the people who is paid for the coming games. Gratitude begins to form, not always sincere gratitude, just, of course. Roman citizens are not simple creatures waiting politely to be impressed. They can cheer, mock, demand, remember, and resent with great energy. Still, the public gift matters. It enters the memory of the city. A man who feeds and entertains the people becomes harder to forget, which is precisely the point. A mainstream fact anchors this public bargain. Roman elites frequently sponsored games, feasts, and distributions as part of political competition and civic generosity. Historians at universities such as Stanford and Oxford often describe this practice as a system of public benefaction, where status was strengthened through visible giving. The sponsor gained honour, and the crowd gained food, excitement, and a day outside ordinary labour. This is not charity in the gentle modern sense. It is a transaction wrapped in celebration. The powerful give because giving displays power. The people receive because receiving is useful, enjoyable, and sometimes necessary. A spectacle may look like leisure, yet it also ties the crowd to names, offices, families, and imperial favour. Rome writes politics into pleasure, then lets pleasure do the remembering. You walk near a grain distribution, where the smell of coarse wheat mixes with sweat and sun-heated stone. Hands reach forward, measures are counted, officials watch carefully, because disorder near food can grow quickly. Hunger is practical. It does not respect marble, ancestry, or speeches. When stomachs tighten across a city, even proud rulers become attentive. This is where bread and games meet. The phrase often used today suggests a lazy mob distracted by cheap pleasure. That is too simple and perhaps too convenient. Food mattered because survival mattered. Spectacle mattered because public emotion mattered. Together, they created a rhythm of relief, gratitude, identity, and control. A hungry person may dream of bread. A worried city may dream of the arena. Rome offers both and calls it order. A quirky tidbit from Roman political life reveals how serious this generosity could become. Some ambitious men spent astonishing sums on public shows, decorations, and distributions to win favour. Ancient commentators sometimes complained that competition grew extravagant, as if the city had become one enormous popularity contest with better sandals and more dangerous animals. Very dignified politics. Naturally, yet extravagance had limits. The state watched, regulated, and sometimes restrained private ambition when it became threatening. A sponsor who could command too much love from the crowd might become dangerous to rivals. Generosity was admired, but overly successful generosity could smell like rebellion. Rome wanted public giving, but it wanted giving placed within hierarchy. Even kindness had a chain of command. The open debate among scholars turns on the question of control. Some historians argue that spectacle helped pacify the urban population by channeling frustration into ritualized excitement. Others insist that the crowd retained real power, since public audiences could pressure leaders, express anger, and shape political reputations. Researchers at Yale and Princeton have explored this tension, and the evidence suggests a complicated exchange rather than one-way manipulation. You can feel that exchange in the square. The sponsor needs the crowd to witness his generosity. The crowd needs the sponsor's resources. Each side watches the other. A cheer is not just noise. It is approval made audible. A groan is not just annoyance. It is warning. A ruler may command armies, but a Roman crowd gathered in public can still become an uncomfortable mirror. Power dislikes mirrors. Still, the arena offers a useful mirror because it frames emotions safely. The people can shout, gasp, laugh, condemn, and celebrate within boundaries. Their energy rises, but it rises toward the sand. The event gives public feeling a shape. It allows the city to release pressure without necessarily changing the structures that created the pressure. That is one reason violence becomes politically useful. It absorbs attention with unusual strength. A speech may bore, a decree may confuse, a procession may impress for an hour, but a dangerous spectacle enters the nerves. It is remembered through the body, through heartbeat, sweat, and the involuntary tightening of hands. The sponsor borrows that intensity. When the people remember the day, they remember who paid. When they discuss the best fighter, the rare beast, the surprising mercy, or the shocking execution, the sponsor's name moves through the city with the story. Public memory becomes advertising before printed posters and glowing screens. Ancient Rome would have understood modern branding disturbingly well. You hear the crowd chant a name. The sound rolls across stone and into the open air. It is not worship, not exactly. It is not democracy, not exactly. It is something older and more physical. A mass of voices recognizes a giver. The giver stands where he can be seen accepting their noise. For a few moments, a status becomes sound. The emperor understood this better than anyone. Imperial spectacle magnified the bargain until it filled the capital. When an emperor sponsored games, he appeared not merely wealthy, but almost cosmic in generosity. He could feed the city, summon animals, display captives, punish criminals, honor fighters, and command days of public emotion. The crowd received abundance, and abundance seemed to flow from one man. That image was politically golden. A ruler who gives pleasure becomes harder to hate openly, though certainly not impossible. Romans were perfectly capable of hating a generous ruler if he gave them enough reasons. Still, public spectacle softened distance. The emperor might be remote in palace, law, and command, yet present in the arena as provider. He appeared before the people in a shared moment, surrounded by cheers, rituals, and controlled danger. You should not imagine this as mere trickery. Many spectators likely enjoyed the game sincerely. Many also understood the political message. Human beings can enjoy a gift while knowing it has strings. They can accept food from power and mock power later over wine. They can cheer the emperor and complain about taxes in the same afternoon. Rome was not simple, because no city worth studying ever is. The darker truth is subtler. Control works best when it does not feel only like control. It feels like relief, belonging, holiday, and memory. It feels like bread in the hand and spectacle in the eyes. It feels like a city breathing together. It feels, for a few hours, as though the world is properly arranged. That feeling is precious, and precious feelings are useful to those who govern. You stand among people leaving a public distribution. Their voices easier now, their steps slower. Some are speaking of the coming games. Some compare sponsors. Some speculate about which animals may appear. A child clutches bread against his chest. An old man complains that past entertainments were better, because every age contains someone convinced decline began yesterday. The day continues. Rome does not need every person to be fooled. It only needs enough people to participate, enough to remember, enough to associate power with provision, and provision with pleasure. Violence becomes popular not because the crowd forgets politics, but because politics learns how to wear the face of celebration. Bread fills the body, games fill the imagination. Together, they teach the city that power can arrive as a gift. The crowd has its own hidden hunger, quieter than shouting and older than the stones beneath its feet. You sit among thousands as the air grows thick with heat and expectation. A breeze moves briefly across the seats, carrying the smell of sweat, dust, olive skins, wine, and wool warmed by the sun. Then it disappears, as if even the wind has decided to stay and watch. The arena below waits in brightness, and the people around you begin to lean forward. No one commands them. That is the troubling part. A trumpet may announce the beginning, an official may signal, a sponsor may preside, yet the leaning forward belongs to the crowd itself. It comes from within the body, from curiosity, fear, excitement, boredom, cruelty, sympathy, and the strange human urge to know what happens next. The Romans did not invent that urge. They built a world around it. A mainstream fact helps frame the scene. Ancient writers such as Seneca described the moral danger of watching public violence, especially when the crowd's mood intensified around punishment and death. Modern scholars at universities such as Yale and Stanford have treated these accounts cautiously, yet they remain important evidence that some Romans understood spectacle as psychologically powerful. The arena was not only a place of events, it was a place where feeling changed. You can feel that change now. At first, the crowd is scattered in attention. Some spectators talk, some eat, some adjust clothing. A child complains. A man laughs too loudly at his own remark, a Roman tradition that somehow survived into every century. But when danger approaches, attention gathers like water flowing into one channel. Separate minds begin to move together. The first gasp matters. It is small, but it spreads. One section sees something before another. A fighter stumbles, a beast turns unexpectedly, a condemned person resists. Sound travels through the seats, and emotion travels with it. Soon the crowd no longer feels like many watchers. It feels like a single breathing body, with thousands of eyes and one unstable pulse. This is where distance does its work. You are close enough to see danger, but not close enough to be touched by it. Safety sharpens excitement. The wall between spectator and sand becomes a moral instrument. It permits feeling without consequence. It allows fear to become pleasure because the danger belongs to someone else. That is a dark exchange. A quirky tidbit from Roman accounts and inscriptions reveals how audiences could develop strong preferences for particular fighting styles or performers. They did not always watch blindly. They judged skill, endurance, courage, elegance, and showmanship. Some spectators behaved less like beasts and more like extremely intense critics with snacks. This does not make the scene gentle, but it makes it more complicated. The crowd wants meaning, not only injury. A clean strike may impress more than a clumsy wound. A brave recovery may stir admiration. A fighter who refuses panic may win affection even from those who came expecting his defeat. The audience is not merely waiting for a body to fall. It is watching for character under pressure, or what it has been taught to call character. That teaching is important. Roman culture prized discipline, courage, endurance, and self-command. The arena gave those values visible form, but in a morally crooked setting. A man could display admirable courage because he was trapped inside a brutal system. The crowd could admire the virtue while avoiding the question of why such virtue was being demanded for entertainment. The mind is skilled at avoiding discomfort. You may know this from quieter modern habits. People can watch suffering from a safe distance and call it news, justice, sport, drama, or necessary truth. The label changes the feeling. Rome excelled at labels. It gave the crowd categories that softened the act of watching: criminal, barbarian, fighter, a beast, enemy, favourite, coward, hero. Labels arrange sympathy. Once a person becomes a type, the watcher can decide how much feeling to spend. Too much pity becomes inconvenient. Too little feeling becomes frightening. The crowd seeks a middle path, where excitement is intense but responsibility remains light. That path runs straight through the arena. An open scholarly debate turns around whether Roman spectators became more cruel through repeated exposure, or whether the games simply reflected values they already held. Historians at Oxford and Chicago have approached this question from different angles, comparing literary criticism, legal culture, military ideals, and social ritual. The evidence resists a single answer. The crowd shaped the spectacle, and the spectacle shaped the crowd. It is a circle. A person attends once and feels shock, then attends again and understands the sequence, then attends again and knows when to cheer. Familiarity becomes instruction. What once seemed terrible becomes expected. What is expected becomes discussable. What is discussable becomes part of social life. The mind adjusts itself, often more quickly than conscience would prefer. You notice this in the people around you. A woman covers her eyes, then parts her fingers. A boy imitates a sword movement with his hand. An old soldier watches with narrowed attention, perhaps measuring technique rather than drama. A wealthy man looks bored until the danger sharpens. An enslaved attendant watches his master's reaction before choosing his own expression. The crowd contains many private worlds, yet the shared moment presses on all of them. When a fighter falls, a wave moves through the seats. Some shout for mercy, others demand the end, some simply wait to see where the stronger feeling gathers. In that pause, the crowd discovers itself. It hears what it wants, then becomes more confident in wanting it. The arena makes desire audible. That may be one of its greatest powers. Private thoughts become public sound. A person who might hesitate alone feels stronger among many. The shout seems to belong not to one mouth, but to Rome itself. Once the crowd has spoken, the individual can hide inside the multitude. Responsibility dissolves into thunder. A short silence follows. It feels enormous. Then the decision comes, through signal, authority, or performance. The crowd responds as though a knot has been untied. Relief may feel like joy. Horror may disguise itself as excitement. Compassion may arrive too late, or not at all. The body remembers the rush more clearly than the reasoning that surrounded it. This hidden hunger is not only hunger for cruelty, it is hunger for intensity, hunger for shared feeling, hunger for moral certainty, hunger for the sight of fear contained within walls, hunger for proof that courage can exist, that law can punish, that power can arrange chaos, that fate can be watched from a seat. Rome feeds all these hungers together. You can sense why the games persisted. They answered emotional needs that ordinary civic life could not easily satisfy. They made fear public and manageable. They turned danger into a pattern. They allowed people to feel alive beside death without admitting that this was what they had come to feel. The darkness is patient here. It does not scream. It does not leap from the sand with a theatrical grin. It sits beside you in the ordinary comfort of belonging. It whispers that everyone is watching, so perhaps watching is acceptable. It whispers that the person below has a role, while you have only a seat. It whispers that distance is innocence. But distance is not innocence. It is only distance. The crowd roars again, and you feel the sound enter your ribs. For one breath, you understand how easily a person can be carried beyond himself. Not because he is uniquely wicked, not because Rome placed evil in his blood, but because the crowd offers warmth, permission, rhythm, and release. That is the hidden hunger of the stands. It is the longing to feel deeply without being alone, to witness danger without entering it, and to call that trembling mixture entertainment. Women and children sit beneath the same wide sky, and the arena becomes part of family memory. You notice them in the upper tiers, where sunlight falls harder and faces blur with distance. A mother adjusts a child's tunic. A girl leans against an older woman's shoulder. A boy balances on the edge of a bench until someone pulls him back by the sleeve. Around them, voices rise and fall with ordinary impatience, as though they are waiting for a procession, a market bargain, or a long-delayed meal. The scene is unsettling because it is so normal. There are no separate worlds here, one gentle and one violent. Roman public life folds them together. The same person who lights a household lamp at dusk may cheer at the arena by noon. The same child who learns prayers, family names, and table manners may also learn which fighter deserves applause. Violence enters the young mind not as an invasion, but as civic weather. It is simply there. A mainstream fact stands quietly behind this image. Roman spectators were divided by rank and legal status, and imperial seating regulations helped assign different groups to different areas. Historians at institutions such as Oxford and the University of California have examined these arrangements as evidence that the audience was socially mixed, yet carefully ordered. Women, children, citizens, foreigners, Freed people and enslaved attendants could all be present, though not equally placed. Placement matters. A woman seated far from the arena may still be part of the event. A child high in the stands may not see every detail, yet he hears every roar. An enslaved attendant may watch while holding food, shade, or cushions for someone else. The amphitheatre is a map of society, but it is also a school. Every seat teaches a lesson about where bodies belong. You hear a child ask what is happening below. The answer comes softly, perhaps too softly. An adult explains the rules, the names, the costumes, the likely outcome. Maybe the adult hides the worst of it, maybe not. Roman childhood was not protected in the same way many modern families imagine childhood should be protected. Death was closer, disease came faster, public punishment was visible, household discipline could be harsh. The young did not grow up in a world wrapped in soft cloth. Still, they were children. That is the point that lingers. A child can become used to almost anything if trusted adults treat it as ordinary. The arena teaches not only through spectacle, but through the calmness of those who guide the child's eyes. Look there. That one is brave. That one is doomed. That one deserved it. That one fights well. That one should have stood firmer. Small lessons settle deeply. A quirky tidbit appears in the way Roman children played with miniature versions of adult life. Archaeologists have found toy soldiers, dolls, small animals, and gaming pieces across Roman sites, while literary sources suggest children imitated public rituals and adult behaviours. It's not hard to imagine boys pretending to fight as gladiators with sticks, while parents smiled with that ancient expression meaning charming now, possibly expensive later. Games make culture portable. A child does not need to understand politics to imitate a sword stance. A girl does not need to hold office to understand that public honour matters. A young spectator does not need a lecture on social hierarchy to notice who sits near the front and who climbs toward the sun. The body learns the pattern before the mind explains it. Women's presence in the arena also unsettles modern expectations. Roman moralists sometimes complained about female spectators, especially when women admired performers or became emotionally invested in the shows. The complaints reveal more than they intend. They show that women were present enough to trouble certain male writers, and interested enough to become part of the social conversation around spectacle. Respectable anxiety is often very informative. If a moralist worries that women are looking too eagerly at gladiators, he's also admitting that gladiators are worth looking at least in someone's opinion. If he complains that women are swept into excitement, he is acknowledging their participation in public feeling. The arena was not a purely masculine chamber of violence. It was part of broader urban life, and urban life rarely obeys tidy categories. An open scholarly debate remains over how regularly women attended different types of spectacles, and how their experiences varied by class, status, and period. Scholars at Cambridge and Yale have explored the issue through legal texts, satire, inscriptions, and archaeological seating patterns. The evidence is uneven, but it points toward participation shaped by restriction, expectation, and opportunity rather than total exclusion. You can feel the variations in the crowd. An elite woman may arrive with attendants, shaded and watched carefully by others. A poorer woman may sit higher, balancing discomfort with curiosity. A mother may attend because the household attends, or because the spectacle offers relief from cramped rooms and repetitive labour. A young woman may come because a famous fighter's name has turned half the neighbourhood into poets of questionable quality. The arena allows desire to hide inside public custom. That is part of its power. A spectator can say she came because everyone came. A man can say he came for courage. A child can say he came for animals. A politician can say he came to honour the people. Each reason protects another reason beneath it. Public entertainment gives private feeling a respectable cloak. You notice a family sharing food. Bread breaks in rough pieces. A small cup passes from hand to hand. An older child complains about the heat. A younger one asks whether the animal will come back. Someone laughs. Someone points. The domestic and the violent sit beside each other without apology. That closeness gives the scene its deepest discomfort. Violence becomes popular when it becomes shareable, not merely watched by hardened men, but discussed at home, repeated in games, remembered by children, admired by lovers, argued over by elders, and woven into the stories a city tells about itself. A spectacle that reaches families has already crossed a threshold. It no longer belongs to the margins. It belongs to the calendar of ordinary life. The crowd reacts suddenly. The child beside you startles, then smiles because the adults are smiling. That tiny turn matters. The young learn emotional permission by reading older faces. If the mother laughs, perhaps it is safe. If the father cheers, perhaps it is admirable. If the crowd roars, perhaps this is what one is supposed to feel. A culture can enter through the ear. The roar becomes part of memory, and memory becomes expectation. Years later, that child may return as an adult with another child beside him. He may not remember the first blood clearly, but he will remember the light, the bread, the heat, the crowd, and the feeling of belonging to something enormous. That is how traditions survive, not only through laws, emperors, and stone buildings, but through ordinary bodies passing habits to smaller bodies. A hand pointing toward the sand, a voice naming a fighter, a laugh at the wrong moment, a lesson in who deserves pity, who deserves punishment, and who may be watched without guilt. You look again at the women in the stands. Some are bored, some are intent, some are anxious, some are thrilled. Some are probably more interested in the people around them than anything below, which is possibly the most Roman detail of all. Public events are always partly about watching the watchers. The arena offers violence, but it also offers society displaying itself. For a moment, the sun catches jewellery near the upper rows. A bracelet flashes and disappears. A child's hair lifts in the breeze. The sound below grows sharper, yet the family conversation continues around it. Life does not stop for violence here. It accommodates violence, makes room for it, and passes the olives. That is the ordinary darkness. The popularity of Roman entertainment rests not only in blood or punishment, but in its ability to become a shared day out. Family, status, curiosity, flirtation, gossip, civic identity, and fear all sit together on the stone benches. The arena does not replace ordinary life. It enters ordinary life until the two become difficult to separate. And under the bright Roman sky, a child learns where to look. The emperor sits where every eye can find him, and the arena becomes a throne without walls. You see him not only as a man, but as a carefully arranged image. His seat is placed to command attention. Attendants stand nearby. Guards remain close enough to remind the crowd that affection and danger often share the same doorway. Around him, the architecture seems to bend its meaning. The games belong to Rome, but Rome is being taught to see them through him. The crowd knows where he is. Even when the action below turns fierce, people glance toward the imperial presence. They watch his face, his posture, his gestures, and the small movements that may decide reputation or survival. In the arena, the emperor does not need to speak constantly. He can rule through silence, through a raised hand, through stillness at the perfect moment. Power of small gestures, a mainstream fact, gives this scene its foundation. Roman emperors sponsored and presided over public spectacles, using games to display generosity, authority, victory, and connection with the people. Historians at universities such as Harvard and Oxford have examined imperial spectacle as a form of communication, where rulers performed closeness while remaining untouchably elevated. The emperor appeared among the people, yet above them. That tension is the performance. He must seem generous, but not weak, accessible, but not ordinary, merciful, but not easily moved, dangerous, but not unstable. In the arena, he can embody all these qualities before a vast audience. The crowd watches violence below, but it also watches the person who permits, shapes, and interprets that violence. You feel how carefully the scene is balanced. If the emperor gives too little, he seems cold. If he gives too much, he may seem wasteful or desperate for love. If he ignores the crowd, resentment may gather. If he indulges the crowd without judgment, dignity may thin. Ruling Rome is apparently difficult when even generosity requires stagecraft. Poor man, surrounded by marble, armies, and impossible seating arrangements. The emperor's presence changes the meaning of mercy. When a defeated fighter looks toward authority, the crowd may shout its preference. Yet the final signal, in many cases, belongs to the sponsor or presiding power. The moment becomes a drama of judgment. The ruler appears able to grant life, permit death, and absorb the roar of the people into his own image. This is power made visible. In ordinary administration, imperial authority may feel distant. Taxes, decrees, military commands, and legal decisions travel through officials and documents. In the arena, authority has a body. It sits under the open sky. It reacts. It hears. It seems to share the crowd's emotion while directing it. That illusion of shared feeling can be politically precious. A quirky tidbit appears in the figure of Commodus, who famously presented himself in the arena and associated his image with gladiatorial performance. Ancient writers hostile to him describe these appearances as disgraceful and bizarre, partly because an emperor was expected to preside over danger, not mingle with it as a performer. The ruler who stepped too far into the sand disturbed the hierarchy the spectacle was supposed to display. Rome liked controlled danger. It did not always enjoy seeing control embarrassed. Commodus reveals a boundary. The emperor may use the arena to appear powerful, generous, and fearsome. But if he becomes too much like the people who fight for entertainment, his majesty risks contamination. A gladiator can be admired precisely because he is socially marked. An emperor imitating him threatens to confuse the symbolic order. Rome enjoys contradiction. Yes, but not every contradiction gets applause from historians. The open scholarly debate here concerns how audiences interpreted imperial behaviour at spectacles. Some researchers argue that the games allowed genuine communication between ruler and crowd, because spectators could express approval, anger, petitions, and demands. Others emphasise the controlled setting, noting that imperial power framed the exchange before it began. Scholars at Yale and Cambridge have explored this tension, and the evidence suggests both intimacy and management. You can feel both at once. When the crowd cries out, the sound is real. When the emperor responds, the response is real. Yet the entire meeting occurs inside architecture, protocol, status, and security. The people are close enough to be heard, but not close enough to rule. Their voices rise magnificently, then return to the stone that holds them. The emperor listens from safety. That safety matters. It allows him to appear brave near violence without sharing its vulnerability. He can watch beasts, fighters, executions, and hunts while remaining untouched. His calm becomes part of the show. If he flinches, people may notice. If he appears bored, people may notice. If he delights too much, people may notice. The imperial face is a public document, written in muscle and restraint. You watch him during a tense combat. The crowd has chosen a favourite. The fighter below is wounded, breathing hard, but still upright. Voices begin to gather round a demand. Some ask for mercy. Others want completion. The sound divides, then swells, then searches for the emperor's decision. For a moment, thousands of people exist inside one waiting breath. The emperor delays. That delay is not emptiness. It is theatre. The longer he waits, the more his signal matters. Suspense sharpens dependence. The defeated man depends on him. The crowd depends on him. The entire scene depends on his willingness to end uncertainty. This is why spectacle flatters power so effectively. It makes authority feel necessary. Then the gesture comes. The crowd erupts, relieved by decision itself, even before agreeing with its outcome. Authority has spoken through movement. The event can continue. The world has not fallen into confusion. Whether mercy or death follows, the emperor has occupied the center of meaning. That is the political magic of the arena. Rulers also use spectacles to celebrate military victories. Captives, spoils, staged battles, exotic animals, and processions could turn conquest into public experience. The empire's distant wars became visible in the capital. People who never marched with the legions could still feel victory as colour, noise, danger, and abundance. The emperor appeared as the source of all this ordered marvel. Victory became entertainment. Entertainment became loyalty, or at least the hope of loyalty. A ruler could remind the crowd that enemies were defeated, grain arrived, beasts were captured, fighters trained, criminals punished, and Rome remained central beneath the gods and the sun. Even uncertainty could be managed if it entered the arena under imperial sponsorship. Yet this performance carried risk. A displeased crowd could embarrass a ruler. A failed spectacle could stain reputation. Empty promises, poor organisation, or insufficient generosity might provoke mockery. Roman crowds were not decorative. They remembered disappointments with impressive talent. They could turn a public gift into a public measurement of weakness. The emperor stands inside admiration and judgment. This makes the arena more than a place of control. It is also a dangerous stage for those who control it. The ruler must prove himself repeatedly, because popularity is never finished. It must be fed. It must be refreshed with new gifts, new wonders, new displays, and new assurances that the empire still works. You see the exhaustion inside grandeur. The emperor may appear godlike, but his image depends on labour, money, soldiers, animals, builders, prisoners, performers, and the crowd's restless memory. One man sits in the honoured place, yet thousands of hidden hands hold that place together. Majesty, when you look closely, has a very large staff. The sun lowers slightly. Gold touches the edges of the imperial enclosure. The crowd's noise softens between events, then rises again as attendants prepare the next display. The emperor remains visible, framed by power and expectation. To some, he is father of the people, as to others, a necessary sponsor. To others, a dangerous man whose favour can kill or save. The arena gives him all these faces, and because the people see those faces together, they learn to experience power as spectacle. The emperor does not merely govern. He appears, he judges, he provides. He watches violence and makes watching feel civic. In that performance, Roman entertainment becomes a mirror of imperial rule itself. At the centre sits the man who need not enter the sand to command it. The arena carries sacred shadows, even when the crowd believes it has come only for spectacle. You feel this most clearly in the pauses. The noise fades for a moment, and the stone seems older than the empire that shaped it. Above, birds cross the open sky. Below, attendants move with solemn efficiency, clearing the sand, adjusting objects, preparing entrances, checking omens of timing and display. Nothing is accidental, or at least Rome prefers to believe nothing is accidental. Ritual loves repetition. The games may appear as entertainment, but Roman public life rarely separates amusement from religion as cleanly as a modern mind might wish. Festivals, vows, funerary memory, imperial honour, divine favour, and civic duty could all touch the spectacle. A day of games might honour a god, an emperor, a victory, a funeral, or a public promise. Rome did not always ask whether pleasure and sacred duty belonged in different rooms. It placed them together under the sun. A mainstream fact stands quietly behind this sacred atmosphere. Many Roman games were connected to religious festivals and public rituals, and magistrates often held responsibilities that blended civic authority with religious observance. Historians at institutions such as Oxford and Harvard have emphasized that Roman religion was deeply public, performative, and tied to the welfare of the community. The gods were not merely believed in private, they were addressed through public action. That changes the feeling of the arena. Violence there could be framed not only as thrill, punishment, or display, but also as part of the city's relationship with unseen powers. The Roman world was full of signs, birds, lightning, dreams, entrails, strange births, failed rituals, and unexpected noises could all be treated as messages. A society that watched the heavens for meaning could also watch blood in public, and imagine order being restored. The thought is unsettling. You stand near an altar before the crowd fully gathers. Incense rises in pale threads. Its scent mixes with animal musk, cold ashes, and morning stone. An official covers his head according to ritual custom. Assistants wait. Words are spoken in careful order, because mispronounced sacred language may require correction. Rome is practical even with the divine, especially with the divine. The ceremony is not emotional in the way some modern worship can be. It is precise. It is contractual. It asks that proper actions produce proper favour. Give the gods their due, and the city may stand. Neglect them, and anxiety enters every shadow. The arena, with its danger and visibility, becomes another place where order must be performed correctly. A quirky or fringe tidbit lingers in the older idea that gladiatorial combat may have descended from funerary offerings to the dead. Some ancient writers hinted that blood once honoured spirits near the grave, and later generations turned that memory into public sport. Many scholars remain cautious, because the path from ritual to spectacle is difficult to prove. Still, the possibility haunts the sand like a half-buried bone. Perhaps the games never fully escape the tomb. Perhaps Rome dressed in old fear in civic clothing and taught it to entertain. This does not mean every spectator thought about gods while watching a fighter fall. Many came for excitement, gossip, relief, and the pleasure of being present at something everyone would discuss. Still, ritual meanings can survive beneath ordinary habits. People may stop explaining why a custom matters and continue performing it anyway. The reason fades, but the gesture remains. That is how old shadows travel. The open scholarly debate here is delicate. Some researchers argue that religious and sacrificial origins are essential for understanding violent spectacle. Others warn that emphasizing ritual can make later entertainment seem more sacred than it truly was. Scholars at Cambridge and Princeton have explored this tension, comparing literary sources, inscriptions, calendars, and burial customs. The evidence suggests not one origin, but a long layering of meanings. Layering is a very Roman thing. A ceremony may honour a god and advertise a sponsor. A fight may thrill the crowd and commemorate the dead. An execution may punish crime and restore public order. A hunt may display imperial reach and echo myths of heroes overcoming beasts. Rome is not embarrassed by mixed motives. It almost seems proud of them. You watch a procession enter the arena. It moves with formal rhythm, images, attendants, musicians, officials, and performers create a slow unfolding of power. The crowd sees colour, metal, cloth, feathers, polished surfaces, and sacred emblems. The senses are gathered before the violence begins. Rome knows that the eye must be prepared. Rome also knows that the sacred often enters through beauty. The music sounds across the stone. For a moment, the arena is not a killing ground. It is a stage of cosmic order, or at least the Roman version of cosmic order, which tends to include excellent organisation and unpleasant consequences for outsiders. The gods, the city, the emperor, the sponsors, the crowd, the fighters, and the condemned are arranged into one public picture. Everyone has a place. This is the sacred logic beneath much Roman spectacle. Disorder is shown, then mastered. Wild animals enter, then are overcome. Criminals appear, then are punished. Fighters risk chaos, then display discipline. Foreign marvels arrive, then are placed inside Roman walls. The arena repeats the fantasy that the world can be gathered, ranked, tested, and controlled. It is a comforting fantasy. It is also violent. Sacred systems often promise order, and order can become merciless when it fears disorder too deeply. Rome feared disorder, civil war, famine, plague, bad omens, military defeat, slave revolt, fire, and political betrayal all lived in the Roman imagination. The arena allowed Rome to rehearse control in front of itself. The crowd watched danger appear and watched authority contain it. That containment felt like reassurance. You hear a priestly formula recited somewhere beyond the clearer noise. Perhaps most spectators pay little attention. Perhaps some bow their heads. Perhaps others are too busy discussing a famous fighter's chances. Because human beings can be devout and distracted within the same minute. Sacredness does not erase appetite. Appetite does not erase sacredness. The two sit together. A victim animal may be sacrificed in one setting, while exotic animals are hunted in another. A festival may honour the divine while crowds cheer human risk. A ruler may present games as generosity, duty, and piety all at once. The same day can contain prayer, applause, fear, laughter, and punishment without anyone feeling the need to separate them into neat moral boxes. Modern discomfort often begins with that mixture. You may want religion to soften violence, or entertainment to avoid holiness. Rome does not grant that comfort. It shows you a world where sacred order can stand beside public cruelty and borrow its force. The result is not always hypocrisy. Sometimes it is something older, stranger, and more difficult. A society can sanctify what it fears. A society can ritualize what it cannot resolve. As afternoon light shifts across the arena, you notice how the sand has been smoothed again. The surface looks almost peaceful. No sign remains of the earlier struggle, except in memory and perhaps in darker grains beneath the top layer. This too feels ritualized. Erasure becomes part of continuation. The world is cleaned so the pattern may repeat. That repetition gives comfort to the watchers. It says that disturbance has limits. It says that violence can be contained, cleared, and followed by another act. It says that even death can be placed inside a schedule. The sacred shadow of the arena may lie precisely there, in the promise that chaos can be absorbed by form. The promise is powerful. The promise is false, or at least incomplete. No ritual truly erases the person who suffers inside it. No music makes terror vanish. No official formula removes the fact of a body beneath the symbol. Yet cultures survive by telling themselves which symbols matter most. And Rome was magnificent at making symbols heavy enough to cover screams. The procession ends. The next event prepares itself. Incense thins into the warmer air and the crowd returns fully to expectation. Sacred shadow withdraws, but it does not disappear. It remains beneath the benches, beneath the sponsors' pride, beneath the polished helmets, beneath the sand itself. The arena is entertainment, yes. It is also memory or as rituals, warning, offering, order, and fear made visible. And somewhere beneath all those names, the old darkness remains patient. Laughter rises beside the blood, and this may be the strangest sound in the Roman arena. You hear it first as a ripple, not a roar. A performer slips on purpose. A condemned costume looks ridiculous. A mock animal lurches across the sand with clumsy theatrical legs. Someone in the crowd laughs, then another, until amusement moves through the seats like warm air over stone. The sound feels almost wrong, not because Romans are incapable of humour. They are very capable of it, often with a sharpness that would make a modern dinner party suddenly develop an urgent silence. The discomfort comes from placement. Humour appears in the same public world as danger, punishment, animal hunts, and trained combat. The crowd does not experience these as entirely separate categories. It moves from one mood to another with unsettling ease. Comedy softens the threshold. A mainstream fact gives this mixture historical ground. Roman public entertainment included mime, pantomime, farce, mock battles, staged mythological scenes, theatrical processions, and athletic or competitive displays alongside violent spectacles. Scholars at universities such as Michigan and Cambridge have examined Roman performance culture as a wide field, where laughter, music, dance, punishment, and combat could all belong to public celebration. The arena was not only a chamber of death, it was also a stage. That wider stage matters. Violence becomes easier to accept when it is surrounded by variety. A day of spectacle may not be one continuous descent into horror. It may include surprise, absurdity, colour, pageantry, music, competition, and comic relief. The mind relaxes between darker moments. The crowd laughs, eats, talks, and then becomes ready again. Rhythm protects appetite from exhaustion. Rome understands rhythm very well. You imagine a performer entering with exaggerated swagger, mocking a famous warrior or foreign enemy. His gestures are too large. His helmet sits badly. His shield may be painted with something indecent enough to delight the cheap seats. The crowd laughs because mockery is safe, especially when the target has been chosen for them. Laughter can be a weapon. A quirky tidbit from Roman theatrical culture is that mime performers could be wildly popular, scandalous, and socially suspect at the same time. Some specialised in rude jokes, parody, and physical comedy that made respectable writers wrinkle their noses in moral concern. Naturally. Those same writers often describe the performances well enough to prove they were paying attention. Purely for research, one assumes. The Roman elite often claimed to dislike vulgar entertainment. They also sponsored it, attended it, argued about it, and used it to win favour. This contradiction is not a flaw in the record. It is part of the story. Public amusement could be considered low, and still politically valuable. A performer could be despised in theory and adored in practice. A joke could be crude, yet still reveal how the crowd understood power. You sit among spectators as a comic scene unfolds. The smell of sweat and fried food hangs in the heat. Someone behind you laughs with his whole chest. A child repeats a gesture and is quickly corrected, not before several adults grin. For a few minutes, the arena feels almost harmless. Almost. That word is doing a great deal of work, because laughter can make the place feel less severe. It can release tension after fear. It can turn discomfort into social bonding. It can help spectators forget, or pretend to forget, what the same sand has held. When people laugh together, they feel joined. The arena uses this joining carefully, even when no single person planned it with perfect calculation. An open debate among scholars concerns whether comic and non-violent performances diluted the cruelty of spectacle or reinforced it by normalizing the entire event. Historians at Yale and Chicago have approached the question through theatre, crowd behaviour, and festival culture. Some argue that variety made violent scenes more tolerable. Others suggest that laughter sharpened the contrast and made the darker moments more memorable. Both possibilities can be true. A crowd that laughs before punishment may feel less burdened by what follows. A crowd that laughs after danger may feel relieved enough to stay. A comic mockery of outsiders may prepare the mind to see real enemies as less human. A playful staged reversal may teach spectators that humiliation is a public pleasure. The joke does not stand alone. It belongs to the whole machine. You hear music begin. Flutes and drums mark a change in mood. Dancers may move with bright garments. Acrobats may tumble. A comic actor may imitate a pompous official, and the crowd enjoys seeing authority made ridiculous under controlled conditions. This is another safety valve. Rome permits mockery when mockery remains inside the frame. A laugh aimed at power can be allowed, provided power owns the stage. That is a clever arrangement. The people feel they have laughed freely. The sponsor feels he has given them the pleasure of freedom. The order of society remains intact, perhaps even strengthened. because permitted laughter leaves fewer dangerous echoes than forbidden anger. The arena does not only manage fear, it manages amusement. A staged myth can become especially strange. Suppose the story involves a boastful figure punished by fate. The crowd knows the tale. The actors exaggerate. The costumes make the familiar visible. Then, if the scene darkens into real suffering for a condemned person, entertainment and execution merge. Myth lends shape to punishment. Comedy may even precede the cruelty, making the transition feel like part of the performance rather than a moral rupture. That is chilling. Not loud chilling, quiet chilling. The kind that settles slowly. You begin to understand why Roman entertainment could hold attention for hours. It offered many emotional textures. Astonishment, laughter, fear, disgust, admiration, relief, pride, and curiosity followed one another in carefully varied waves. No single emotion had to carry the whole day. The crowd could rest inside laughter before returning to danger. Modern audiences know this rhythm too. A frightening tale often needs a joke. A serious drama may include a foolish character. A competition becomes more watchable when personalities, rivalries, and comic moments soften the pressure. Rome did not need modern language to understand emotional pacing. It knew that humans stay longer when they are not held at one pitch. The troubling question is what laughter does to conscience. Perhaps it lightens the heart. Perhaps it protects the mind from too much darkness. Perhaps it makes cruelty easier by placing it inside a festive sequence. Perhaps it does all three, depending on the spectator, the day, and the story being staged. The evidence cannot tell you every private reaction. It can only show that laughter was present, and presence matters. A performer bows, the crowd applauds, a sponsor smiles, vendors resume calling, a child asks when the animals return. The question floats through the warm air with no sense of contradiction. Comedy has done its work. The spectators are refreshed, and the day is ready to turn again. You remain aware of the sand. Its surface looks the same beneath farce and fear. A clown may stumble there. A fighter may fall there. A dancer may spin there. A condemned man may stand there. The place itself does not change. Only the meaning assigned to each body that enters. Rome's genius lies in changing the frame quickly enough that the audience follows without resistance. Laughter beside blood is not an accident. It is part of how the spectacle breathes. It makes the darkness social, flexible, and strangely bearable. Some Romans look away, and their unease leaves a quieter mark than applause. You hear their voices not from the roaring seats, but from letters, essays, sermons, complaints, and moral reflections written in calmer rooms. The lamps are lower there. Wax smoke hangs above a desk. A stylus scratches across a tablet. Outside, the city continues its trade in noise, desire, politics, and public pleasure. Yet somewhere, one thoughtful spectator remembers what the arena did to him, and he does not like the memory. This matters deeply. A civilization is never one voice. Rome does not cheer in perfect harmony across all centuries and classes. Some admire the games, some use them, some tolerate them, some condemn them publicly while possibly attending privately. Because human inconsistency is one of the most reliable artifacts ever produced. The critics do not erase the crowd. They reveal its complexity. A mainstream fact stands behind these dissenting voices. Roman writers such as Seneca criticized arena violence and warned that watching cruelty could deform the character of spectators. Scholars at universities such as Princeton and Oxford have often treated these moral writings as evidence that the games provoked anxiety within Roman culture itself. The arena was popular, but popularity did not mean moral peace. You sit with that thought in a quieter Rome. The room smells of ink, oil, wool, and warm plaster. A man writes by lamplight, remembering a public show where the crowd demanded harsher punishment, louder suffering and less mercy. His discomfort is not merely about the victim below, it is about the watcher above. He fears what happens inside a person who grows entertained by pain. That fear is surprisingly modern. It asks whether the soul can be trained by spectacle. It asks whether repeated exposure makes cruelty easier. It asks whether laughter at suffering becomes a habit, then a taste, then a character. Roman moralists often wrote in stern tones, but beneath the sternness lies a tender question. What are you becoming while you watch? The question is not easily answered. A quirky tidbit appears in the story of a reluctant spectator who is said to have resisted looking at the games, then opened his eyes at a critical moment and became captivated by the blood and noise. Whether polished by literary art or rooted in real experience, the tale captures a fear that many cultures recognize. Curiosity can defeat intention. The eye can betray the conscience. Very inconvenient. The human eye. You may decide not to look, then look because others gasp. You may dislike violence, yet want to know why the crowd has erupted. You may tell yourself it is only once. Then memory returns with sharp colour. The critic understands that the arena does not require your full consent at first. It only needs your attention for a moment. That is why looking away becomes so difficult. The games create social pressure, sensory force, and narrative suspense. They pull at disgust until disgust becomes fascination. They surround hesitation with celebration. A person who looks away may still hear the crowd, smell the dust, feel the bench vibrate, and sense thousands leaning toward the same forbidden centre. Refusal has to resist more than sight. An open scholarly debate remains around how representative these critics were. Some historians argue that elite moralists exaggerated corruption to express philosophical ideals or social snobbery. Others suggest their discomfort reveals real ethical tension within Roman life. Researchers at Yale and Cambridge have compared literary sources, legal texts, and public inscriptions. Yet the balance remains uncertain. The loud crowd survives in stone. The quiet conscience survives in fragments. Fragments can be powerful. You imagine a young man leaving the arena unsettled. His friends are laughing, repeating the best moments, arguing over whether a fighter deserved mercy. He smiles because not smiling would invite questions. Yet inside, something remains heavy. The faces below were too clear. The noise felt too eager. He cannot say this aloud without sounding weak, pretentious, or boring, which may be the worst Roman crime at a dinner party. So he says little. Private unease often begins like that, not as rebellion, but as discomfort without a public language. A person feels that something is wrong, but everyone else seems comfortable. The crowd becomes proof against the conscience. If thousands accept it, perhaps the troubled person is mistaken. The mind seeks shelter inside agreement, even when agreement smells faintly of blood. Philosophers gave sharper words to that unease. Stoic thinkers valued self-command, reason, and freedom from destructive passions. For some of them, the arena encouraged the opposite. It inflamed anger, cruelty, excitement, and dependence on external thrills. The problem was not only that people suffered, though that mattered. The problem was that spectators surrendered their inner discipline to the crowd. The crowd becomes a tutor, not a wise tutor. A person enters with his own judgment, then leaves carrying the crowd's mood like dust on his clothing. What he hated at first, he may later desire. What once startled him, he may later expect. The philosopher fears this slow alteration. He fears not one moment of cruelty, but the erosion of the inner witness. Early religious critics brought a different kind of objection. Some Christian writers rejected the games because they saw them as idolatrous, morally corrupting, and bound to violence incompatible with their vision of spiritual life. Their criticisms grew stronger as Christian communities became more visible across the empire. They did not always speak with one voice, but many treated the arena as a place where the soul was placed in danger. That word matters. Danger not only for the condemned, danger for the spectator, danger for the child learning to cheer, danger for the official who confuses judgment with dominance. danger for the city that baptizes cruelty as celebration. The critics ask Rome to look not at the sand, but into the heart that enjoys the sand. Some people must have found this irritating. Moral criticism often irritates those who came for a pleasant afternoon of structured horror and snacks. A defender of the games might say the condemned deserve punishment. The fighters choose or accept their fate. The people need entertainment, and courage deserves admiration. He might accuse critics of softness, hypocrisy, foreign influence, or philosophical gloom. Rome has many replies when challenged. The critics still write. Their writing suggests that the popularity of violence was never total silence around doubt. The arena produced fascination, but also resistance. Not always successful resistance. Not always organised resistance. Sometimes only a paragraph, a sermon, a complaint, a refusal to attend, or a memory recorded with shame. Yet these small acts matter because they show that another way of seeing existed. You are now in a street at dusk. People are leaving the spectacle. Their footsteps fill the paving stones. Some speak excitedly. Some are tired. Some carry children. Some repeat jokes. Somewhere among them walks a person who has decided not to return, or at least tells himself so. Another person laughs too loudly because unease feels safer when disguised. Another feels nothing unusual at all. The city absorbs them. Lamps appear in doorways. Dinner smells drift from upper rooms. Water runs in channels beside the street. A dog noses at discarded food. The day's violence becomes conversation, then memory, then perhaps dream. For most, the machine has worked. For a few, something has slipped out of alignment. The dissenting voices do not make Rome gentle. They make Rome human. They remind you that no culture is fully captured by its loudest entertainment. Within the same world that built vast amphitheatres, people also questioned what those amphitheatres were doing. Within the same city that roared for spectacle, someone sat by lamplight and worried about the soul. That worry is a fragile thing, but it survived. A province learns Rome's taste slowly, first through stone, then through habit, then through pride. You are far from the capital now, in a town where the empire arrives not as a single roar, but as roads, taxes, soldiers, officials, coins, baths, forums, temples, and new expectations. The air smells of lime plaster, wet clay, cooking smoke, and fields beyond the walls. Local languages still fill the market. Old gods still receive offerings. Families still remember older ways of belonging. Then the amphitheatre begins to rise. At first, it may seem like another public building. Workers cut stone, haul timber, mix mortar, and mark foundations. The structure grows slowly under sun and rain, with scaffolding clinging to its ribs. Children watch from the edge of the work site. Merchants complain about blocked roads. Local elites visit in clean garments, speaking with the confident seriousness of men whose names may soon be carved into public memory. A mainstream fact gives this provincial scene its shape. Amphitheatres and arenas appeared across the Roman Empire, from Gaul and Britain to North Africa, Spain, and the eastern provinces. Archaeologists from major universities have studied these buildings as evidence that Roman spectacle travelled widely, though it adapted to local wealth, customs, and politics. Rome did not simply conquer land. It taught cities how to perform Romanness. That word matters here. Romanness is not only citizenship or law, it is a style of public life. It is a way of arranging space, honour, leisure, and power. A provincial town that builds an amphitheatre is not merely importing entertainment. It is announcing that it understands the imperial language. It can host games. It can gather crowds. It can display order. It can belong. You stand near the half-finished wall as chisels strike stone. The sound is steady and dry, like hard rain. Dust coats the workers' arms. A foreman checks measurements. A patron speaks with an architect, pretending not to enjoy being watched while doing so. The building is already a spectacle even before any event begins. Construction itself tells a story. It says that the town has resources. It says that local leaders can give. It says that Roman forms have taken root here. The arena is a promise carved into the landscape. When completed, it will gather the population into a shared vision of empire, adjusted to local size and local ambition. A quirky tidbit appears in the variety of provincial amphitheatres. Some were grand stone structures, others used timber, earth banks, or adapted natural slopes. Not every town could afford imperial magnificence, because marble dreams have always been more generous than municipal budgets. Still, even modest arenas could carry large meanings. A smaller ring of seats could still teach the same lesson. The lesson is participation. You imagine the first games in this town. People arrive from surrounding farms, villages, workshops, and villas. Some come proudly, eager to see what the new building can do. Some come skeptically, because every age has people who say the old festivals were better and this new fashion is a waste of good stone. Some come because absence from public excitement feels almost antisocial. The crowd is local, but the pattern is imperial. There may be local officials seated in places of honour. Veterans may attend with the gravity of men who have seen real battle and now judge imitation. Traders sell food. Children chase one another until adults become annoyed. Women gather in groups, exchanging news between glances toward the arena. Enslaved attendants carry cushions, water, and instructions they did not request. The building gathers them into Rome shape, yet the old local world has not vanished. That is too simple. A provincial arena may stand near older shrines, local markets, ancestral burial roads, and landscapes filled with memories older than Roman rule. The people who attend may carry mixed identities, speaking one language at home and another in public business. The games become a place where these identities touch, blend, resist, and perform. An open scholarly debate surrounds how deeply provincial populations embraced Roman entertainment. Some historians view amphitheatres as signs of cultural integration and elite imitation. Others emphasize negotiation, arguing that local communities adapted Roman spectacle for their own purposes. Scholars at Oxford, Stanford, and Chicago have examined inscriptions, building plans, and regional differences, and the evidence suggests a patchwork rather than one uniform empire. That patchwork is important. Rome does not spread like paint over a wall. It moves through agreements, ambitions, pressures, rewards, and local choices. A town may build an arena to impress imperial officials. A wealthy family may sponsor games to outshine rivals. Veterans may support Roman customs because they anchor their status. Local citizens may attend because the spectacle is genuinely exciting. Not every adoption is obedience. Some adoption is desire. That makes the story darker. Because empire works best when people begin to want its symbols. A conquered or absorbed town may learn that Roman entertainment brings prestige, visitors, business, and official approval. Local leaders discover that the crowd cheers a sponsor who provides spectacle. Young people grow up seeing the arena as part of civic life. What began as an imported form becomes a local tradition. The taste is travelled. You feel this during a provincial festival, where old and new elements mingle in the air. There may be offerings to familiar gods under Roman names. There may be inscriptions honouring emperors alongside local benefactors. There may be fighters trained nearby, animals captured from regional landscapes, and ceremonies shaped by both imperial fashion and local memory. The crowd may not think of this as cultural transformation. They are simply attending a public day. That is how transformation often works. It hides inside ordinary pleasure. A new building becomes a landmark. A new festival becomes expected. A sponsor's generosity becomes family memory. A child grows up assuming that the arena has always belonged to the town, even if his grandfather watched it being built. Violence, once localized, becomes civic heritage. You notice how provincial elites use spectacle to climb. A magistrate sponsors games and gains honour. His name appears in an inscription. His family receives gratitude. His rivals must respond with equal or greater generosity. The contest for prestige produces more entertainment, and the people become accustomed to receiving it. Rome has created a political grammar that local ambition can speak fluently. The arena also marks who is inside the Roman order and who remains outside it. Captives, criminals, beasts, and condemned bodies may be brought into the circle to represent disorder. The town watches disorder contained, and in watching, it imagines itself as part of order. This is the empire's quiet genius. It lets distant communities rehearse the centre's worldview using their own stones and their own crowds. You hear applause in a town far from Rome. The sound is smaller than the capital's thunder. Yet it carries the same structure. It rises around status, danger, generosity, punishment, and wonder. It teaches local people that power can be festive, that hierarchy can be entertaining, and that violence can become a shared civic language. Still, the province is not a mirror only, it reshapes what it receives. Some regions may favour certain shows, some may combine spectacle with local festivals. Some may build modest venues and use them irregularly. Some communities may resist, ignore, or reinterpret the Roman form. The empire is vast, and vast things are never identical from edge to edge. Even so, the pattern spreads. Stone circles appear under different skies. In Britain, rain darkens the seats. In North Africa, heat trembles above the sand. In Gaul, local towns gather beneath banners and official names. In Spain, families climb through entrances worn smooth by years of use. Each place adds its own light, its own smell, its own memories. The dark truth widens with the map. Roman violence became popular not only because the capital loved it, but because many communities found uses for it. It offered prestige to elites, excitement to crowds, identity to towns, and a shared performance of belonging. To become Roman was not only to obey laws or pay taxes. Sometimes it was to sit in a local arena and cheer in a language Rome understood, and across the provinces the sound continued to travel. Death becomes business when enough people learn how to sell the path toward it. You enter the marketplace behind the spectacle, where the grand public face of Roman entertainment breaks into smaller trades and quieter calculations. The air is thick with sawdust, hot metal, sweat, cooking oil, and animal bedding. Men carry beams. Women sell food. A leatherworker repairs straps. A physician cleans instruments with tired care. A broker argues over the price of a fighter as if discussing a mule with excellent shoulders. The arena is only the shining surface. Beneath it lies an economy of bodies, skills, materials, contracts, repairs, transport, and risk. Every public show requires hidden preparation. The crowd may remember the final cheer, but someone must buy the shields, feed the animals, hire the musicians, maintain the gates, paint the scenery, train the fighters, clean the sand, and settle the debts. Spectacle is never free. It only looks free when someone else pays loudly enough. A mainstream fact gives this world its structure. Roman gladiatorial schools, animal suppliers, contractors, builders, armourers, and event organisers formed part of a wider entertainment economy. Historians at institutions such as Stanford and Oxford have studied inscriptions and legal texts, showing that spectacles required professional management and substantial funding. The games were emotional events, but they were also financial operations with ledgers behind the applause. You follow a lanista, a trainer and manager of gladiators, through a yard where men are being assessed. His eye is practical. He notices height, reach, old injuries, temperament, obedience, and sale value. He may speak of honour in public, but here he speaks of investment. A promising fighter is expensive to buy, expensive to train, expensive to feed, and expensive to lose. Profit prefers survival. This is one of the uncomfortable details. The arena may seem obsessed with death, yet its economy often depends on keeping valuable performers alive long enough to become known. A fighter who survives builds reputation. Reputation draws attention. Attention increases value. Death may create a memorable climax, but repeated survival creates a marketable name. Rome understands branding. A quirky tidbit appears in contracts and notices that suggest fighters could be hired for events. With costs varying according to skill and outcome, the sponsor might pay more if a gladiator died, because the owner had lost property. Even mortality could produce an invoice, which is exactly the kind of detail that makes the ancient world feel both distant and horribly familiar. Someone always finds a way to itemize disaster. You stand beside a workshop where helmets are polished. The metal catches the light in bright, curved flashes. A craftsman checks hinges, crests, cheek guards, and decorative surfaces. The helmet must protect, but it must also impress. It must turn a human face into something memorable, something that can be recognized from a distance. Practicality and theatre meet under the hammer. Nearby, a shield maker paints bold designs. A net is repaired. A sword edge is examined. Padding is stitched. Sandals are fitted. Every object carries a cost, and every cost must return value through spectacle. A show that seems spontaneous to the crowd is actually assembled by tradespeople whose work must not fail at the critical moment. The business of violence depends on competence. A broken gate can ruin timing. A weak cage can kill the wrong person. A dull blade may prolong a scene badly. A sick animal may disappoint the crowd. A poorly trained fighter may die too quickly, wasting his investment and irritating spectators. The machine requires skill not because it is merciful, but because inefficiency is expensive. An open scholarly debate concerns the scale and organization of this economy across different periods and regions. Some researchers argue that large imperial spectacles produced highly specialized networks, while smaller towns relied on flexible local arrangements. Scholars at Yale and Cambridge have examined inscriptions, training sites, and legal regulations, but evidence remains uneven. The capital's machinery cannot be assumed for every provincial arena. That unevenness matters. In a grand city, entertainment may involve complex chains of supply. In a smaller town, local patrons may improvise with limited resources. A few trained fighters, regional animals, borrowed equipment, and temporary structures may have to suffice. Yet the economic logic remains similar. Public prestige needs production. Production needs labour. Labour needs payment, coercion, or both. You walk past cages prepared for transport. The animals inside are restless. Their keepers are watchful, because living cargo is dangerous and expensive. Capturing an exotic beast is only the beginning. It must survive the journey, be fed, guarded, stored, and presented at the right time. If it dies too early, wonder rots before reaching the sand. The empire monetizes distance. A beast from a far province is valuable because it carries rarity. A fighter with a famous record is valuable because he carries story. A condemned criminal is useful because the state can turn punishment into spectacle. A skilled musician, comic actor, acrobat, or announcer adds rhythm and polish. Even the vendor in the upper tier sells food because public emotion makes people hungry. You hear coins, small coins changing hands, larger sums promised, debts recorded, wages withheld, bribes offered, bets whispered. Gambling almost certainly followed popular contests, even when authorities frowned upon excess. Spectators who argued over fighters and outcomes would naturally place wagers when confidence outgrew wisdom. Rome did not need modern betting shops to understand reckless certainty. A man boasts about his chosen fighter. He will regret it. The business of death also includes memory, souvenirs, paintings, graffiti, lamps decorated with gladiators, and small objects carrying arena imagery helped spread the spectacle beyond the event itself. Archaeologists have found many everyday items that show how deeply such images entered Roman homes and habits. Violence became portable, collectible, decorative. The arena left the arena. That is an important turn. When a gladiator appears on a lamp, his image enters the household at night. When a child sees a fighter carved or painted on an object, the public spectacle becomes a private symbol. When a fan scratches a name onto a wall, admiration becomes advertisement. The economy does not end with the final shout. It continues through memory, gossip, objects, and desire. The dead can still sell, so can the living, if they have survived well enough. You stand near the accounts table after an event. The spectacle has ended, but work continues. Owners demand compensation. Workers await payment. Animals must be removed. Injured fighters need treatment. Equipment returns to storage. Officials record details. Sponsors measure public reaction. Because applause is a kind of currency too, this aftermath feels less dramatic than the sand, yet it may reveal more. Here the arena becomes visible as administration. Each thrilling moment has paperwork behind it. Each act of apparent generosity carries calculation. Each burst of public emotion is connected to private cost. The glamour thins, and the machine shows its teeth. A trainer looks at a wounded fighter. He's not only wondering whether the man will live, he is wondering whether the man can fight again. Compassion may exist, but it shares space with arithmetic. The physician binds a wound. The owner estimates recovery. The sponsor considers reputation. The crowd has gone home with stories, while the business remains with consequences. This is why Roman violence could endure. It supported people. It enriched some, employed others, and trapped many. Once an entertainment becomes an industry, it develops defenders beyond pure enjoyment. Builders want commissions, trainers want contracts, vendors want crowds, patrons want honour, officials want order, fans want their favourites. Economic roots make moral change harder. Popularity becomes infrastructure. You feel the weight of that word. Infrastructure is not only roads and aqueducts, it can be habits, markets, expectations, and livelihoods. The arena created a world in which too many people had something to gain, or at least something to survive by maintaining it. The question was never simply why spectators loved violence. It was why an entire network found violence useful. The answer is quieter than a cheer. Because it paid. Because it honoured. Because it employed. Because it advertised. Because it ranked people. Because it gave rulers a stage and merchants a crowd. Because it turned danger into predictable demand. Because once enough hands depend on a machine, the machine begins to look necessary. The market behind the arena dims as evening settles. A worker sweeps dust from a threshold. A scribe closes a tablet. A cook pours water over a blackened pan. The smell of animals remains in the passage, stubborn and sour. Somewhere. A fighter sleeps badly. Somewhere else. A sponsor smiles over the memory of applause. The crowd may dream of courage. The owners count what courage cost. The myth of universal approval begins to crack when you listen for quieter differences inside the Roman crowd. From a distance, the arena looks united. Thousands sit in one circle. Thousands turn toward one centre. Thousands rise, gasp, shout, laugh, and argue as though they share one enormous mind. It is tempting to imagine them as a single, Roman creature, hungry for violence and satisfied by the same dark meal. That image is too simple. You move closer, and the crowd separates into human fragments. A veteran watches technique with the weary eye of someone who has seen unscripted killing. A merchant studies the sponsor, wondering what generosity says about local influence. A child waits for animals because animals are easier to understand than law. A philosopher frowns and pretends not to be interested. A young woman watches a famous fighter with a smile that would make several moralists faint into their ink pots. One arena, many appetites. A mainstream fact supports this more varied picture. Roman literary sources, inscriptions, graffiti, legal records, and archaeological finds show many attitudes towards spectacle, from admiration and enthusiasm to anxiety and criticism. Historians at universities such as Cambridge, Yale, and Oxford often warn against treating Roman audiences as a uniform mass. The spectators were divided by class, gender, status, region, education, and personal experience. That diversity matters because popularity is not sameness. A practice can be popular while people understand it differently. A crowd can attend the same event for incompatible reasons. One spectator may seek justice, another may seek excitement, another may seek political belonging, another may simply seek shade, food, and a tolerable afternoon away from work. Not everyone loves the same darkness. You hear it in the arguments that spread during pauses. Two men disagree about whether a fighter deserves mercy. One praises courage, the other complains that the fight was dull. A woman nearby says the sponsor has spent too much on animals and too little on public repairs. Someone else says the beasts were magnificent and worth every coin, especially since none of those coins came from his purse, which is always the easiest kind of budgetary opinion. The arena produces debate as much as applause. A quirky tidbit lies in the graffiti that praises or mocks particular performers. Some inscriptions call a gladiator beloved, victorious, or irresistible, while others insult rivals or boast about local favourites. These scratched words preserve fandom in rough form. They remind you that spectators developed loyalties, jokes, grudges, and preferences. The crowd was not only watching death, it was building personalities around performance. This makes the culture more recognisable, and that is uncomfortable. People argued over styles, they exaggerated stories, they admired celebrities of low status, they treated public risk as conversation, they likely remembered favourite contests with the selective certainty of all fans everywhere. The past becomes less alien when you see someone insisting his favourite fighter was robbed by poor judgment and cowardly spectators. Human beings have always been inventive in disappointment, yet differences ran deeper than taste. Social rank shaped the meaning of the games. For elite sponsors, spectacle could display generosity and ambition. For poor citizens, it could provide relief, excitement, and participation in civic life. For enslaved people, the arena may have carried more complicated feelings, especially when punishment and domination were so visible. For officials, it could be order. For critics, corruption. For children, memory before judgment. The same scene teaches different lessons to different eyes. An open scholarly debate continues around how much agency ordinary spectators had in shaping the outcome and meaning of events. Some researchers emphasize the power of sponsors, officials, and imperial ideology. Others point to crowd responses, petitions, chants, and public pressure as evidence that audiences could influence decisions and reputations. Scholars at Princeton and Chicago have explored this tension, and the answer seems to rest somewhere between control and participation. You feel that tension when the crowd divides. A wounded fighter stands below, unsteady but dignified. One section shouts for mercy, another section shouts against it. This sound crosses itself in the air. There is no single Roman will in that moment. There are factions, preferences, memories, moods, and sudden loyalties. The presiding authority may decide, but the crowd tries to shape the meaning of the decision. The people are not passive stone. They are also not free in any simple sense. Architecture, seating, ritual, law, and authority frame their reactions. But within the frame, they push, pull, resist, demand, mock, and approve. The arena gives them an emotional language, then listens just enough to make them feel present. That is one reason the system survives. A person who feels heard may return. A crowd that can shout its preference becomes invested in the performance. Even when the final power rests elsewhere, participation creates attachment. The spectators do not merely receive the show, they help finish it. Still, not all attachment is admiration. Some people may attend because attendance is expected. Some may fear seeming disloyal or joyless. Some may find parts of the spectacle thrilling, and other parts repulsive. A man may cheer a skilled duel but dislike executions. A woman may enjoy pageantry but turn away from animal suffering. A child may remember the music more than the fear. Human reactions rarely line up neatly for historians, which is deeply inconsiderate of them. Evidence leaves uneven traces. Stone preserves the building, inscriptions preserve names, literature preserves the educated voice, graffiti preserves sudden enthusiasm, bones preserve injury, laws preserve official concerns, but private discomfort, boredom, confusion, and mixed feeling vanish easily. This is why the myth of universal approval is so dangerous. It fills silence with certainty. You should resist that certainty. It is too easy to say Romans loved violence, as if every person in every seat felt the same hunger. It is also too easy to say they were trapped by propaganda and understood nothing. The more difficult truth is that many Romans probably found the games meaningful, enjoyable, disturbing, useful, ordinary, glorious, vulgar, sacred, profitable, or shameful in varying degrees. The arena allowed all these meanings to coexist. That coexistence made it resilient. If one explanation failed, another remained. If someone disliked executions, he might still enjoy gladiators. If someone questioned animal hunts, she might still admire civic generosity. If someone disapproved morally, he might still attend for political reasons. A spectacle with many meanings can survive attacks on any single one. It becomes woven too tightly. You listen as the crowd leaves in the evening. Their conversations do not match. One person praises the emperor's generosity. Another complains that the games were shorter than expected. One argues that the defeated man showed courage. Another laughs about a comic scene. Someone talks only about the heat. Someone else claims the animal handler was the bravest man of the day. The event breaks into memory. Each spectator carries away a different Rome. For one, Rome is justice. For another, theatre. For another, cruelty. For another, relief. For another, status. For another, a place where life feels larger for a few hours. Popularity does not require agreement. It requires enough meanings to draw enough people back. The myth cracks further when you consider regional difference. A grand show in the capital was not the same as a modest event in a provincial town. Local customs, budgets, audiences, and political needs shape the experience. Some communities may have embraced spectacles eagerly. Others may have used them selectively. The empire's taste for violence did not spread as one identical flavour. It changed on each tongue. This gives the dark truth a more human shape. Roman entertainment became popular not because every Roman carried the same brutal heart, but because the arena could answer many desires at once. It could flatter elites, excite crowds, discipline bodies, create celebrities, honour gods, advertise rulers, and offer ordinary people a place inside public emotion. That flexibility was its strength. The crowd roars in memory, but beneath the roar are separate breaths, some eager, some uncertain, some calculating, some ashamed, some delighted, some simply tired after a long day in the sun. History often remembers the loudest sound, yet the quieter differences may tell you more. Rome did not speak with one voice. It spoke with thousands, all facing the same sand. The games begin to fade not with one thunderclap, but with many small silences gathering over centuries. You sense the change first in the edges of things. A sponsor hesitates before spending. A town repairs an arena less carefully. A crowd gathers, but not as often. An official chooses cheaper display. A moral critic writes with growing confidence. A bishop speaks against the old spectacles, and some listeners do not laugh him out of the room. The old appetite remains, but the world around it shifts. Rome is no longer the same creature that first taught stone to circle fear. Emperors rise and fall more quickly. Armies demand money. Frontiers strain. Cities struggle with maintenance. Wealth changes routes. Religious loyalties deepen and divide. Public habits continue, yet the pressure beneath them becomes less stable. Entertainment survives best when power feels abundant. Late Rome often feels anxious. That anxiety matters. A mainstream fact gives this fading its historical shape. Gladiatorial games declined gradually in late antiquity, shaped by changing imperial policy, financial burdens, Christian criticism, and political transformation. Historians at universities such as Oxford, Yale, and Princeton have emphasized that the decline was uneven, with some forms of spectacle continuing while others diminished. The arena did not simply close one night and fall asleep forever. History is rarely that tidy. You walk through a late Roman city where the amphitheatre still stands, but its meaning feels altered. Grass grows in cracks near unused entrances. The outer stones are darkened by weather. A gate that once opened for fighters may now creak reluctantly, used for storage, repairs, or occasional events. The building remains powerful, yet its voice is lower. A child asks what happened there. An older man answers with stories. That is how institutions begin to become ruins. Not when the walls fall, but when the living purpose becomes a memory explained to the young. The arena still holds shape, yet fewer people know its rhythms in their bones. A place built for roaring can survive as a shell of echoes. The decline is not pure moral progress, no matter how comforting that would sound. Violence does not vanish from the Roman world. Executions continue. War continues. Public punishment continues in changing forms. Animal displays and chariot racing remain popular in many places. Human beings are annoyingly skilled at relocating their cruelties when one stage becomes inconvenient. Still, something changes. Gladiatorial combat loses its old centrality. Laws begin to restrict aspects of the games. Christian emperors and church leaders increasingly criticize spectacles associated with bloodshed, pagan ritual, or moral corruption. Yet practical concerns are just as important. Gladiators cost money. Schools cost money. Animals cost money. Buildings cost money. Troubled empire has many expensive problems competing for attention. A quirky tidbit appears in the afterlife of amphitheatres themselves. Some were transformed into fortresses, housing, workshops, markets, or quarries for stone. A building once made to display danger could become a shelter from danger. That is almost too poetic, which means one should be suspicious. But archaeology supports the broad pattern in many places. Stone learns new jobs. You stand inside an arena whose arches have been walled up into homes. Smoke rises from cooking fires where crowds once passed. Children play near stones that once held official seating. A goat chews something with deep philosophical commitment. No trumpets sound. No sponsor's name rolls over the crowd. The building has been absorbed by ordinary survival. This transformation feels strangely peaceful. It is also practical. Late antique and medieval communities did not always preserve monuments because modern visitors might enjoy them. They used what stood before them. A wall could become a defense. A vault could become storage. A seat could become building material. The empire's theatrical machine slowly becomes a quarry of useful pieces. An open scholarly debate continues over the exact causes and pace of gladiatorial decline. Some historians emphasize Christian moral opposition and imperial legislation. Others stress economics, political instability, and changing urban life. Researchers at Cambridge and the University of Chicago have compared laws, texts, archaeology, and regional evidence, and the result is not a single clean explanation. The fade is a braid, not a line. That braid is important. A law may forbid or limit a practice. But laws often reveal struggle rather than instant obedience. A bishop may condemn spectacles, but condemnation proves they still attract attention. A sponsor may stop funding games because he has changed beliefs, lost money, feared criticism, or found better ways to gain prestige. Each motive joins the others until the old system weakens. You hear another kind of crowd now, not the amphitheatre's roar, but the chant of worship in a church. The sound moves differently through space. It rises under roofs, around lamps, incense, and painted walls. A new public imagination is forming, one that sees the body, death, martyrdom, and salvation through different patterns. The arena, once a place of civic unity, increasingly becomes morally suspect in some circles. Yet memory does not vanish. Stories of martyrs place the arena within Christian imagination as a stage of witness and suffering. The old spectacle is reinterpreted. What Rome once framed as punishment can become, in another narrative, proof of spiritual victory. The sand changes, meaning even when the stones remain, the condemned body is no longer merely a warning. It may become testimony. Meaning is restless. The crowd that once cheered power now hears different stories about courage. A fighter's bravery under threat had once stirred admiration. A martyr's endurance under persecution offers another model of strength. The public imagination moves from one kind of spectacle toward another, though not completely, and never without contradiction. People still want drama. They still want danger, triumph, reversal, and awe. Chariot racing continues to draw fierce devotion in the Eastern Empire, and factions around racing can become intensely political. Theatre and public festivals persist in altered forms. The decline of gladiators does not end Roman entertainment. It rearranges the emotional furniture. Some seats are removed, others remain occupied. You walk through a city where a wealthy patron now funds a church mosaic instead of bloody games. That patron still seeks memory, honour, gratitude, and visibility. The form has changed, but the social instinct remains. Public giving continues. Names are still preserved. Status still needs an audience. Rome's old hunger for display does not die easily. It learns new manners. This is why endings are complicated. The fading of arena violence can be seen as a moral shift, and in part it can be seen as a religious transformation, and in part it can be seen as an economic and political adjustment, and in part it was. The historian must hold all these threads without forcing them into one tidy victory procession. The amphitheatre stands in evening light. Its arches are broken, yet beautiful. Birds nest where spectators once shouted. Rainwater collects in hollows. Grass softens the edges of stone. Perhaps a traveller enters and tries to imagine the old noise. But imagination cannot fully restore heat, smell, rank, fear, laughter, and the press of bodies. Ruins are merciful in that way. They remove the crowd and leave the question. Why did it happen? Why did it last? Why did it fade? The answers overlap like shadows at sunset. Violence was popular because it served too many purposes. It faded because the world supporting those purposes changed. Belief shifted, money tightened, politics moved. New forms of prestige emerged. Old pleasures became less defensible, less affordable, or less central. But no ending is pure. The arena's darkness did not disappear from human life. It left the sand and entered other stories, other punishments, other crowds, other stages. Rome's old spectacles faded, yet the human hunger for danger at a distance remained patient, waiting for different costumes. The gates close quietly. No final roar follows. Only the wind moves through the seats where power once taught the crowd how to watch. The sand remembers in ways the written histories cannot, through bone, stone, rust, ash, and silence. You kneel in an excavated space where the modern sun falls gently across broken masonry. The crowd is gone. The trumpets are gone. The sponsor's proud name has cracked along its letters. What remains is quieter and less obedient than literature. Archaeology does not flatter the powerful unless someone forces it to. It lies underfoot, patient and inconvenient, waiting for careful hands. A brush moves across soil, dust lifts, thin as breath. A fragment appears. It might be pottery, a nail, a tooth, a carved token, a bit of painted plaster, or a piece of bone shaped by pressure long-ended. Each object is small, yet each one opens a door. The arena was made for spectacle, but its buried remains speak in whispers, not applause. This whispering changes the story. Ancient writers often describe what they wanted readers to remember. Emperors appear generous or monstrous. Crowds become noble or corrupt. Fighters become examples. Critics become warnings. But archaeology preserves things nobody polished into argument. A healed fracture, a cut mark, a drain, a cage fitting, a stairway worn by feet. These details do not tell everything, but they resist drama with stubborn modesty. A mainstream fact gives this scene its weight. Archaeological studies of amphitheatres, gladiator cemeteries, animal remains, inscriptions, and arena architecture have helped historians reconstruct the practical realities behind Roman spectacle. Research associated with universities such as Vienna, California, and Cambridge has examined bones, buildings, and burial patterns to understand training, diet, injury, and public organisation. The physical record confirms that entertainment was a system built into daily life. You hold that idea gently. The past is not only text, it is material pressure. A staircase smoothed by thousands of sandals proves repetition. A drain beneath the arena proves maintenance. A cemetery with unusual injuries proves occupational danger. A painted notice proves anticipation. A lamp decorated with a gladiator proves memory entering the home. The evidence is scattered, but together it forms a second crowd, one made of objects. This crowd does not shout. It accumulates. You walk through the remains of an amphitheatre where grass bends in the breeze. The seating tiers are partly gone, but the oval still guides your steps. Even broken, the form knows what it was. Your body understands the curve before your mind names it. You look toward the centre and feel how naturally attention falls there. Architecture trains the eye after 2,000 years. A quirky tidbit appears in the ordinary objects decorated with arena themes. Oil lamps, cups, mosaics, figurines, and small household items sometimes show gladiators, animals, or scenes of combat. This means Roman spectacle did not stay politely inside public buildings. It travelled home in clay and image. Imagine finishing dinner by the light of a tiny gladiator lamp. Cosy, in a deeply Roman sort of way. That domestic detail matters because it makes the violence intimate. The arena was not only an event attended and forgotten, it became decoration, memory, conversation, and identity. A household object could turn public spectacle into private familiarity. A child might see the fighter's image before sleeping. A guest might recognize a favorite style from a cup. Violence, once made small and portable, loses some of its distance. The object becomes a souvenir of permission. You move to a collection of inscriptions. Names appear, some elegant, some plain, some broken at the edges. A sponsor records generosity. A fighter's victories are counted. A public official claims honour. A city thanks a benefactor. Sometimes the language is formulaic, almost dry. Yet behind the formula lies a hungry desire not to vanish. Inscriptions are arguments against forgetting. They tell you who wanted credit, who received honour, who was worth naming, and who was reduced to category. Many people who worked the machine remain invisible. The cleaner, the animal handler, the rope puller, the frightened novice, the vendor, the anonymous condemned. Their absence is also evidence. History often preserves the names of those who could afford stone and leaves the rest as traces. A debate among scholars continues over how much can be inferred from skeletal evidence, especially when remains are limited or context is uncertain. Some researchers interpret patterns of injury and diet as signs of specialized gladiatorial life. Others urge caution, warning that not every unusual burial belongs to the arena. Institutions such as Oxford and Chicago have emphasized careful comparison, because bones speak clearly only when questions are disciplined. That caution is a kind of respect. It resists turning the dead into convenient characters. A bone is not a complete biography. A wound does not reveal every fear. A grave does not confess every humiliation. The archaeologist must avoid making the evidence perform too eagerly. After all, the arena already did enough of that. You stand beside a display of animal bones. Some belong to species transported across great distances. Some bear marks of butchery or violent death. Others come from surrounding rubbish deposits. Less dramatic, but equally revealing. The animals of spectacle leave evidence not as symbols of empire, but as remains. Horn, tooth, vertebra, claw. The physical world refuses to stay metaphorical. This is where empire becomes tangible. Not only victory arches and triumphal inscriptions, but cages, dung, feed, transport, death, and disposal. The grand idea of Rome controlling nature depends on very practical consequences. Animals must be caught, shipped, stored, killed, and removed. Archaeology follows the mess that ideology leaves behind. It is almost impolite. Very useful, though. You listen as a modern researcher describes a corridor beneath an arena. The passage is narrow. The air may once have been damp and rank. Workers move there unseen, guiding animals, prisoners, props, and performers toward openings in the floor. The crowd saw revelation. The workers knew the route. Excavation restores the hidden underside of wonder. That underside is essential. Without it, the spectacle seems like pure image. With it, you see labour, risk, and organisation. The arena becomes less like a dream and more like a factory of emotion. Stone and wood, pulleys and gates, ledgers and bodies, all arranged to produce awe, fear, laughter, and obedience. The truth is not less dramatic. It is darker because it is practical. You walk across the arena floor, or where the floor once was. Your foot presses grass where sand once lay. Beneath you may be drains, foundations, service rooms, or compacted layers of use. The centre feels peaceful now. Tourists might speak softly. Birds might call from a broken wall. A guide might point to where the imperial seat once faced the action. The quiet can deceive. Ruins often soften history by removing sound and smell. They make cruelty picturesque. Broken stone under golden light looks harmless, almost melancholy. Yet archaeology asks you to imagine the missing heat, the pressed bodies, the animal panic, the official signals, the vendors, the arguments, the hands gripping stone. The ruin is not the event, it is the event's shadow. A mainstream archaeological fact can sit beside a stranger intuition. The Colosseum's underground complex was modified over time, showing that the spectacle system evolved rather than remaining fixed. That practical evidence reveals experimentation. Rome kept refining the theatre of surprise. The arena learned from itself, adjusted its machinery, and improved the delivery of astonishment. A building can have a career. That thought feels odd, but true. It begins as a political statement. It becomes a familiar landmark. It changes with use. It absorbs repairs, failures, innovations, and memories. Eventually, it becomes a ruin, then a symbol, then a tourist destination. Each stage covers the last without fully erasing it. The sand remembers under every layer. You pause beside a worn stone seat. Perhaps someone once sat there with bread in hand, complaining about the heat. Perhaps a child leaned forward there. Perhaps a woman laughed there. Perhaps a man demanded mercy there and was ignored. You cannot know. The seat offers no confession. Still, its wear proves presence. That may be enough. Archaeology does not give you a full answer to why violence was popular, but it narrows the distance between question and body. It shows that the games required investment, attendance, repetition, and repair. It shows that spectacle entered objects, streets, cemeteries, and urban planning. It shows that violence was not a passing mood. It was built, used, maintained, and remembered. The dark truth becomes heavier when it leaves the page, because stone has no rhetoric, bone has no excuse, a drain has no philosophy. These things do not explain themselves beautifully, they simply remain, asking you to explain them honestly. Evening gathers over the excavated site. Tools are packed away. The trench rests under protective covering. Dust settles back where it can. The ancient crowd does not return, yet the evidence keeps its vigil beneath the modern sky. The sand cannot speak, but it has never been silent. The mirror left behind does not show Rome alone, and that is why it is difficult to gaze into it for long. You stand at the edge of the ruined arena as evening settles, and the stone turns the colour of old bone. The seats are empty now. No emperor waits in his honoured place. No sponsor measures the crowd. No fighter steps into the centre with breath hidden behind a helmet. Only the wind moves where thousands once leaned forward. Still, the question remains, why was violence so popular? The easy answer is cruelty. It is clean, quick, and comforting. It lets you place Rome in a locked chamber marked ancient barbarism, then walk away feeling modern and improved. But the deeper answer is more troubling. Violence became popular because it was made meaningful. It was given ceremony, architecture, music, public order, political value, social status, sacred shadow, economic purpose, and emotional rhythm. That is a heavier truth. A mainstream historical fact steadies this final reflection. Roman spectacles lasted for centuries because they served multiple functions across public life, including entertainment, punishment, elite competition, imperial display, religious observance, and civic identity. Scholars at institutions such as Oxford, Harvard, Yale, and Stanford have long treated the games as part of Roman society, not as a strange accident outside it. The arena was not a crack in civilization. It was one of civilization's public rooms. That sentence should unsettle you, because it means the Romans did not watch violence only when civilization failed. They watched it when civilization organized itself successfully around certain values. The roads worked, the aqueducts carried water, the courts issued sentences, the temples received offerings, the builders raised stone with astonishing skill. Then, under that same disciplined sky, crowds gathered to watch bodies placed at risk. Order did not prevent cruelty. Sometimes order gave cruelty a seat number. You hear the ancient crowd only faintly now, like surf inside a shell. Its roar has become an idea, and ideas are dangerous when they feel safely dead. It is tempting to say that modern people no longer gather around suffering, yet human attention still sharpens near danger. Disaster draws eyes. Humiliation entertains. Punishment becomes public conversation. Conflict is packaged, repeated, argued over, and sold in forms more polished than sand. The costume changes. The hunger does not always disappear. A quirky tidbit from the long afterlife of Rome is that gladiators became heroic figures in paintings, novels, films, toys, advertisements, and public imagination many centuries after the last real combats faded. The condemned performer became a symbol of freedom, rebellion, masculinity, endurance, and spectacle. Humanity looked back at the arena, removed much of the terror, added dramatic lighting, and said, "There, now it is inspiring." Very efficient laundering of discomfort. That does not mean all modern fascination is wrong. To study the arena is not to celebrate it. To tell the story is not to cheer from the seats. History asks you to look steadily at what people made and why they made it. The danger lies in enjoying the image while forgetting the systems that fed it. Helmets shine more easily than chains. You walk along the broken passage where spectators once moved toward their places. Your fingers brush cold stone. The surface is pitted, rough, and darkened in the hollows. Somewhere beneath your hand is the touch of vanished palms, ordinary people who came with expectations, complaints, jokes, fear, and appetite, They were not monsters. That is the problem. Monsters would be easier. Ordinary people built the raw. A scholarly debate still lingers around the moral distance between ancient and modern spectatorship. Some historians emphasize the specific brutality of Roman institutions, warning that comparison can blur real differences. Others argue that the arena reveals enduring patterns in how societies frame violence, status, punishment, and entertainment. Researchers across major universities continue to examine spectacle as both ancient practice and human pattern. The debate remains open, and perhaps it should. A final answer would be too neat. The Roman arena was not the same as modern media, sport, punishment, or public shame. Its legal structures, social hierarchies, slavery, religious frameworks, and imperial politics were deeply ancient. Yet the emotional mechanisms are recognizable enough to disturb you. Distance makes suffering easier. A crowd makes judgment louder. Ceremony makes violence feel permitted. A label makes a victim easier to reduce. Repetition makes shock become habit. These are not only Roman lessons. They belong to human beings. You look down into the center where sand once covered the evidence of each day. There is no sand now, only earth, grass, stone, and shadow. But the idea of sand remains powerful. It represents the surface that hides what a society does not wish to see too clearly. It is the layer smoothed between events. It is the promise that traces can be managed. Every age has its sand. Some sand is literal. Some is language. Some is humour. Some is politics. Some is distance on a screen. Some is the reassuring phrase that the person suffering must have deserved it. Some is the belief that watching is not participation. Some is the comforting thought that a crowd cannot be wrong if it is large enough. But crowds can be wrong. Crowds can also be lonely. That is one of the quietest truths. People gather not only because they want cruelty, but because they want belonging. They want to feel the pulse of others. They want a shared story, a shared gasp, a shared certainty. The arena offered that with frightening power. It gave people something to feel together, and feeling together can become more persuasive than thinking alone. The darkness of Roman entertainment lies there, in the warmth of collective permission. You're not asked to hate the Romans. Hatred is too simple, and it teaches little. You're asked to notice how intelligent, practical, artistic, religious, affectionate, ambitious, and ordinary people can normalize suffering when enough structures support it. A society does not need to lose its mind to become cruel. It only needs to teach cruelty how to sound reasonable. A trumpet in the morning, a ticket in the hand, a sponsor's name on the wall, a joke before the worst part, a cheer when everyone else cheers. Small permissions gather like dust. The ruin grows dimmer now. The first stars appear above the broken arches. In the softness of evening, the arena almost looks peaceful. And perhaps that is another warning. Time beautifies what it cannot forgive. Stone becomes golden. Blood becomes story. Fear becomes atmosphere. The listener grows calm, and the old world slips toward dream. Let it become quiet, but not empty. Let the question remain beside you like a low lamp. Why was violence so popular? Because Rome made it useful. Because Rome made it beautiful. Because Rome made it public. Because Rome made it orderly. Because Rome gave it meaning. And people are drawn toward meaning even when meaning is wrapped around harm. The wind moves again through the seats. No crowd answers. Only the mirror remains, darkened by centuries, polished by memory, waiting for each new age to notice its own reflection in the stone. And perhaps the most unsettling truth is not that Rome enjoyed violence, but that Rome understood how to make violence feel like belonging. And perhaps, very softly, that story is not yet complete. End of script. Good night.